If I wanted to care about my mental health, I wouldn't have done this book. I decided that about a year and a half ago.
You always say it's your last book every time.
Well, I got to redo the NES book. But after that, it's done. Has to be. I have to like live my life before I'm 50.
What if you just let me take care of the NES book this time? Don't even proof it. Don't even
proof it.
Just listen. Let me pitch you on this. Don't even overlook it. You just say it's gonna happen, right? And in exchange for utter peace of mind, just knowing that you just make the decision and then you just go sip Bellinis or whatever you're gonna do. You know what I mean? At the poolside, right? And then I just do my best, right? And it will make money.
Okay, so I have to give
You know
up
what I'm saying?
all control of a book.
I'm not saying have to. I'm saying choose to.
I'm saying
decide.
What is
this
your
isn't
guarantee
enough.
that you would not drop the ball on the new edition of the NES book? What is that?
What it
guarantee?
is? It's just trust, baby.
You
know what I'm saying?
That doesn't count for business.
It doesn't count. It doesn't count for business, but that's exactly what I'm saying. The thing that you're giving up is stressing about it. You just don't stress about it, and you will get some money in return. That's how much. Okay. And whatever money you lost in your mind, like, first of all, you never have to know what your version of the book would be like. You don't have to worry about it. And in your mind, if you do think to yourself, you know what, my version of the book would have made more money than this, right? Which, let's be honest, that's unless it's a runaway hit, that's probably what the vibe's going to be, right? Like, unless I did it and it made like a fucking surprising amount of money, right? I think probably you would be like, my version of the book would make more money. But you're then in your mind saying, I will pay that difference in imaginary money that we didn't have to lose.
Well, first of all, it's not imaginary money because you wouldn't be working on a new NES book for free.
It's a holistic choice for Pat's spiritual health.
I feel like you'd have to pay me up front the rights to do it, and then pay me a smaller back end deal. Like that's what it sounds like to me.
That's a much more shrewd business deal, right? But what I'm saying is,
Pat needs a guarantee.
Yeah, but that's the point. The point is to not need the guarantee. The point is to let go.
It's how I make a living, Alex. I mean, for you, this is like a pet project that it'd be for you. You don't give a shit.
This isn't even real. This isn't even real. This is just a thought experiment. I'm discussing the notion that you might just pay some of the money that you didn't have to earn to lose or spend to lose, and in return you just do nothing, and the idea of what you did already makes money again.
Welcome to the Not So Common Podcast, everyone, by the way. Today, Alex Fasciani and Pat Country, that's me.
Hello, I didn't see you there, audience.
We'll be discussing what PRGE was like for Pat, and then we'll be discussing, we found a critique of our podcast. We found a podcast.
The sharks are in the water, folks. They're after us. They're trying to nail us down.
The Mr. McMahon documentary. Then feedback to create art, talking about maybe a new way to create art entertainment by bringing in the fan base from online to help mold your project. A new way to create
art entertainment is not what I would describe it as, but we'll get to that in a little while.
But going back to the N64 book or these books, that was my goal with the N64 book, which, by the way, for pre-orders is going to be shipping out, hopefully starting later this week. The goal was to basically be as hands-off as possible, to hire an editor to take care of everything, and that didn't work out. I'll just put it mildly. It did not.
But did it not work out because you kept checking in and seeing that the progress on the book wasn't going the way that you wanted?
It didn't work out because I didn't check in and didn't micromanage, so by the time I realized, all this work is fucking trash, and I have to throw it out and redo it.
But what if it had just been? What if it had just come out and been trash?
Then that's my reputation, and it would suck. The book would have sucked. What do you mean? You can't put out shit.
Like, you can't put out shit, but like, is it shit or is it just
like things that were not edited and factually incorrect things and just lazy editing? And I'll just leave it at that. That's not the current editors. The replacement editors I brought on board afterwards were fine. And then, of course,
to be clear, I'm in this book. I got nothing bad to say about this book.
No. Like I said, nothing. All that original work that I deemed bad was thrown out after I paid for it. By the way, so After this wasn't a freebie. People work for me for free. And then it's like, well, it is what you get. No, it's like, oh, I paid them a fair amount, and then it was trash. And
So
if
what
you're
do you?
listening
So
to
what
this-
about?
Huh?
So what about me though? Then like, let's say I'm this editor instead, right? Like I've been a successful guy in a lot of my ventures. Right?
I think we got to start the podcast, Alex, because
What do you mean? This is good. This is good
not
stuff.
good.
This is gold.
People don't want us to argue about my book for an hour and
It's
a half.
not argue. It's not. We're what we're both doing. We're
What's that?
trying to make things work out for Pat. You know what I mean? Like we're
I
trying to
don't
get
think you
Pat.
care about me that much, Alex.
I
really.
do. I do. Actually, I care more about you than I care about the book.
Wow. Okay. Well, you realize the book is a source of income for Pat, so I can pay my mortgage. But thank you.
I get it. I don't think it's going to be a failure regardless. I'm talking
no,
about.
it's not going to be a failure because I took control. I took the reins back over on the project a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
And there's no one else out there that could do it.
I have not found the person so far. I've tried and failed to find that person.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm pretty successful. Like I've done some good projects in the past.
Yeah, but you've done some good projects, but nothing like this. I keep saying that to you because you bring this up every other week.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I made a great sandwich the other week. That means I could change a tranny on a car.
No, I just want to be clear. I don't actually think I want to do this, but what I'm proposing is that there's somebody out there with the skills to do
There might
this.
be. There might.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I went to Portland Retro Gaming Expo this past a week ago. It's the biggest. It's like the main event for retro gaming. It's like the mecca. I always tell people.
First of all, how was the weather? How was Portland?
Portland's always fun. The weather was 65 degrees. It was nice for a port. It wasn't too cold.
That's beautiful.
Probably also because they usually do it like mid to late October, so probably end of September. Was you got like 5 or 6 extra degrees there of warmth.
Love that.
And always great to see everyone out there. I had a booth there. It was a 2.5-day convention this year. They added a Friday, like half day. They usually always had the arcade on Friday. This year they had the arcade plus on Friday they basically had a giant wall they put up to separate the two parts of the vendor areas. So there were Friday vendors that if you were savvy, you would have bought a cheap like 8-foot table and then vended 3 days because you had no competition on Friday. So next year, that's a serious consideration if I go back. It's like, well, I had the option to vend on Friday, but the books would not have arrived on time. And yes, I did premiere the book there because logistically, that's how it worked out. There was a delay in the main shipment to the warehouse, unfortunately, but I did get the shipment for PRGE.
It's so frustrating.
It's
so
bad.
frustrating to put it because obviously you can see from how we're talking about this book that Pat is greatly invested in every minute detail of this thing's like process, and the fact that like at every turn he's meeting like just basic inconveniences that are like completely out of his control. And just like not his fault in any way. It's hard to watch.
I will probably do like an hour-long video one day, the same way I did. Hey, I quit my job. I quit my job 10 years ago video a couple of years ago, and I just did it off the cuff for like 40 minutes. I got 100,000 views because that's how YouTube works. It's like if you put in any thought and effort or anything, no one cares a lot of times. But I'm going to do that for the book at one point without getting sued for. Well, it's not defamation if it's true. And just
don't say who it is.
And just talk about
doesn't matter who it is.
all the bad things I had to go through in order to make this book possible, and I'm still going through them right now on the back end business side of it. Like it's almost like I don't feel like the world's against me sometimes, but I feel like I've been punished for doing this book. I feel like I've been
it's a
punished.
hard thing to do as like a one guy band.
No, true, but I'm saying this has been 10 times harder than the last book. Like it's been significantly harder than the last book for lots of reasons, and I don't want to say it's fair. The world's not fair.
A lot of them literally like socioeconomic and geopolitical. The reasons why your book was harder to do.
Some of it, I guess.
We had a pandemic. Like it changed the face of every business. It made everybody's life harder. It sucked the joy out of like so many people's jobs.
On the front end, I think you're right for the writers. Some of the writers. Because I started recruiting that summer of 2020. There were writers, and even brought back
creatives got hit the hardest of anyone.
And some
in terms
people
of that,
some people I can tell right then, like 2 or 3 writers, basically, I could tell through their communication, even before they started writing, were freaking out because of the pandemic. Like they were not dealing with it well, and that affected their work, or they were unable to contribute.
The creative organ is very delicate.
What's that?
The creative organ is very, very delicate.
Oh, yeah. So that was the first thing, but I won't get into it. But anyway, PRGE was great. Thanks to everyone who came out to my panel. I figured out this was my 13th PRGE in a row because they went away for a couple years because
God
of COVID.
damn.
Would have been 15 in a row, Alex. 15 years. I'm an old man on the circuit for these conventions at this point. I understand that.
I start thinking about like that I've been doing the same job like for like more than one console cycle, and I'm like, oh man.
It's been 2.5 console cycles.
Yeah.
For you. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's a lot.
The Switch is almost it's 8 years old. The Switch.
It's almost time for the Switch with 2 eyes instead of 1 eye.
It's the longest time between Nintendo consoles ever. By let's see,
Got to be the
2
Game
years, 3
Boy,
years.
right?
No. I mean for the main consoles.
Oh yeah.
I mean like for the main consoles.
It had a long tail, yeah.
Because the NES was only like 5 years before. Oh, excuse me, 6 years, and then it was like 5 years for Super. Then it was 5 years.
We've eclipsed them all.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that I've noticed at PRGE is that, and I'm going to try to explain this without. I like to stay grounded in terms of where I am in the world, but I was more bothered than ever before going to this PRGE. Not necessarily bothered in a bad way, that I could never have a private moment, even outside the convention, like walking on the street. I was getting noticed by people. And I understand like that's part and parcel for being a quote unquote, influencer, being around the scene. It just to me seemed more noticeable this year. Like even being in the hotel lobby, like sitting down, waiting for my lift to come pick me up to go get Moroccan food with my friend.
There you go.
And his wife. Like someone noticed me and said, "Hey Pat," and they were very nice. This isn't a dig on them at all. They were nice. Like, "Hey Pat, I saw you over here. You seemed alone. Why don't you come over and you have a drink with me and the voice of Bowser, who I've actually met before." And I was just like, "Oh, okay. I thank you for the offer. I'm fine. I'm waiting for my lift." But it just seemed like there was more of that this year than before, and I honestly believe that probably of the retro game vendors, probably 70 to 75% of the retro game vendors at this point know who I am when I'm walking around. And I never envisioned that to be a thing where like being recognized by all the vendors and knowing they have a reaction, whether it's positive or negative, and just sort of like stealing yourself. And it's mostly going to be positive because most of the vendors are great, almost all of them.
It would be weird to go up and accost someone who is like a person of honor at the convention that you're at and talk shit while you work there.
It's not about fear of being accosted or harassed. It's just knowing that I cannot have a private moment. And the feeling of there's always eyes on me, not to do anything bad, but there's always going to be eyes on me at these conventions. And that's not how it was the first probably few years I was doing the conventions. Like people obviously knew me from YouTube, but not to the same extent. About being around.
That's a thing, man.
And it's not just because it's not like I have millions of subscribers, but the fact that I come back every year. There's about five or six conventions that I do every year, like the circuit, like Too Many Games, SoCal Gaming Expo, Long Island, Retropalooza, Portland. There's ones that I've done almost every single year now for like 10 plus years, right?
Yeah.
That people see me every year. They know who I am at these. And that's just part of the job, or that's part of the description. And I don't know, it's a dumb complaint to have if it's a complaint, but it's sort of like it is what it is. I didn't really think about the extent of it until this last PRGE. I didn't.
You just wanted. Do you think you wanted more privacy?
I think I didn't realize I wanted it until I realized it was gone. Until it was like, I wish I can just blend in now a little bit more. And now at some of these conventions, it's just not going to happen.
You should buy like one like anime outfit, like just like a bunch of like just weird ass clothes that you would never wear, like a weird hoodie or something.
Pull the Hugh Jackman at Comic-Con and wear a Wolverine mask.
That's genius.
Get a Pat mask and walk around. Get a Pat silicone mask.
Yeah, it's a great idea. But like the William Shatner mask.
Yeah, I'm sure you and your friends that are big wigs at some of these conventions probably feel the same way. But yeah, I took it for granted.
Big wigs. I don't know about big wigs, but I do know what you mean. Actually, like more what I know is like, I go to a lot of conventions, like you just said, like there's like the way that I think about them is so weird because they're so like mechanical and cyclical. And there's like a lot of parts of them that like involve like booking your reservation and going here at this time and seeing this thing and doing this whatever. And like at some of them, like the same people do it every single year. So I start to like, after I've gone to that same convention many times, I start to associate that person with some part of the experience in a way. And it's usually for me, like as the traveler, usually somebody kind of random, you know what I mean? Like like some guest who's been there, like you, like some kind of guest that I always see come up and talk in front of the opening ceremony, or like has the same booth every year or something like that. And it's just like, you're part of it's more than just being Pat, the guy on YouTube or the podcaster or whatever. It's like, you have become like one of the rides at Disneyland. You are,
Yes.
you are one of the features. Yeah.
I'm sewn into the fabric of some of these conventions.
Like in people's memories. Yeah.
No, it's what's interesting is that obviously I can't remember everyone that I meet, because I meet all the people that come out to say hi to me, but also all the vendors. We're talking about several hundred people a year, right? But when I see them again at a convention, like, oh, that's the vendor at this convention I see every year. I do remember when I see their faces and see their booth. I'm like, now it comes back to me. Now I know at least what they are again. Like my memory gets tapped when that happens. So in that way, but I can never remember everyone's name. It's very few vendors I remember their names. But
some people are named people, some people are not named people, and that's just totally.
I still remember how they are, though, like the type of person they are once I start talking to them. But it's interesting. It's just a thought I had. I'm not trying to sound arrogant or anything, but like that's just what it's become.
I bet you that a lot of people who do what we do are on our level at least. But I suspect that just people who go to conventions in general know exactly what the fuck we're talking about. That way that you kind of like remember it by how, oh, over in this corner is that one stand where the guy's like kind of an asshole, but he has like really good prices, and over here, like that type of shit, like that, that's what you expect when you're there. That's what you learn about. That's like the ropes that you learn. It's just a thing that's only there temporarily sometimes.
Which makes it weird, and I think we talked about this one other time, where there are some conventions where the influencers / YouTubers / streamers that show up with a goddamn entourage.
Yeah.
And I'm talking like not just one or two people. Sometimes it's one or two people. They have flunkies that like do everything for them. They have gophers, which to me is so weird. Maybe because I had a real fucking job before YouTube, and to me that's like insulting to have an intern run around for me at a convention. But some of them show up with 8, 9 people. They make a scene of themselves. I won't say what YouTubers they are, but people that are at the conventions know. And to me, it's like, wow, they bought into their own hype. They bought into this where I have an entourage. I'm important enough where I have to have hangers-ons and people all around me at all times while I'm walking the convention floor. And it's the most, I don't know, I don't say disappointing. I just feel like sometimes, even probably you and me, we're just on another planet for some of these other people. We're just not.
I'll agree with that. Yeah. It feels like stuff like that. It's like, okay, first of all, let me be clear. There are definitely people that need to have entourages sometimes. Like if
Correct.
you are famous enough, there are some people where there's enough jobs that need to be done around you at all times that you do actually need people.
But we're not talking about jobs. We're talking about when you're just walking around the floor.
That's exactly what I'm saying. There is not a single person who's ever been a guest at any of these conventions probably at all, including like fucking Logan Paul or whatever, who really needs an entourage around them at all times.
Yes.
If you're fucking Julia Roberts or some shit, maybe, if you're the president of the United States, maybe then you might need an entourage of 8 or 9 people. But everything else to me is a bit of theater that we're all doing in the same way that it feels real good to shoot a student film. You know what I mean? It feels real Hollywood to be posted up with a clipboard sometimes.
The one person that needs an entourage at all these who's treated like a god, James, does not have an entourage walking around.
He does not need one. Yeah, he doesn't actually need one.
Because he's down to earth and he's a real person.
And even he, the most famous YouTuber that we can think of that has to do with retro games, pales in comparison to the size of anyone who actually pragmatically needs
you're
an
not
entourage.
Mr. I'm going to beat myself out. Beep, YouTuber, you're not the fucking Beatles.
Yeah.
You're not going to have, 50 women tearing your hair and clothes off. Yeah. You're like, that's not going to be happening. It's relaxed.
That's just some favors you're tossing to your buddies so that they feel cool.
I'm getting so much more impatient with my brethren every year. I don't know if it's old man Pat, but I'm just like,
Yes, it is. It is old man Pat. 100%.
I'm just so sick of the bullshit.
We've
of
all
people.
been bullshit artists before. We've all done the bullshit. I have no delusion that I am above this shit. I was 20 and I was 22 or whatever, and I had this job. You know what I mean? Like I made dumb, childish decisions when I thought that I was a grown ass man, and I wasn't.
No,
you
sure,
know
but you grew about. I mean, people that are grown ass adults though. That I'm looking at.
Well, we all go at our same pace. We all go at our different speed.
I don't know. I look at some of these folks. I'm just like, I don't understand how we have the same not position. How are we in the same realm of existence somehow? I just don't understand it at some point.
Well, there's the Old Man and the Sea, right? And then there's the Five Nights at Freddy's novelization. You know what I mean?
Or it's a little closer to the Hemingway.
I don't know. I'm not making any comparisons between us and these pieces of literature. I'm just
spoilers. The Old Man of the Sea, I think, dies at the end after bringing in the Marlin. I think
it's right there in the title. He's old. What else is going to happen?
But that one last hurrah. I think I'm going to be the Old Man of the Sea maybe next year. I don't have.
You already are the Old Man in the Sea. You're the Old Man and the FPGA. You're the Old Man and the CRT.
Dude, I don't know. I don't talk to other. I don't ever ask, hey, what do other people think about me? Other creators. I kind of know my place. I'm like the respected old guy that never blew up. Compared to the others.
I think you I think you are looking at the wrong metrics for what effect you have. I think that there are much more popular YouTubers that don't get recognized as much. I think that we forget about, actual fame when we think about ourselves because it's embarrassing to think about that.
Sure.
When you're a YouTuber. But I think that, there's a scene like, okay, this is not the greatest example, but just as a little thing, I was watching Hot Ones the other day.
Okay.
And it was that remake of that movie. I forget what it's called, but it's James McAvoy, Michelle. Oh God, I don't know the actress's name. But it's the actress who's in that movie with him. And they were doing the one where they ask each other questions, and the question was, "What's your favorite video game?" To James McAvoy, and he was like, "You're not going to get this. I'm so sorry. There's just no way you're going to answer this. It's too deep of a cut." And he turned it around, and you know what it said on the fucking pad? It said fucking Secret of Mana, right?
Oh,
okay. And even somebody like James McAvoy, if he's enjoying Secret of Mana today, right? And he goes and he looks back, he's going to be in the universe. He's going to be in the ballpark of people that are like you and maybe will stumble upon your videos.
James McAvoy, well, he's my age, so it makes sense.
I'm just saying,
how old is James McAvoy?
Doesn't matter. I'm just talking about fame in general, and I'm talking about video games. And if there's people in the world that are connected to video games, it's people that have jobs like ours and people who write about video games for magazines to a lesser extent. And I think that it's important to understand that anybody who cares about video games, there's not exclusive video game YouTubers just for famous people to watch or people who are influential to watch. Sure. I've been surprised by hearing from show like Chilluminati, which reaches a little wider than a video game related thing. Sometimes I get feedback from people, or I hear that pretty surprisingly A-list people just listen to my show because
I trust me. I've heard from. There's a composer in Hollywood that is very well known at this point that wanted to hang out with me at Comic-Con. It just didn't work out. And it's not someone I regularly talk to. And they're very nice. And I've talked to them before. And I was just not shocked, but I was just surprised, oh, they want to hang out. I'm like, okay, sure, yeah. Because I know for something so geeky, the importance. For me, obviously the retro gaming stuff and the collecting, every convention I have at least 3 people that say, hey, Flea Market Madness got me into collecting games. For you, it might be, you're a Pokemon influencer, right? And now you are a conspiracy theory, weird ghost and goblins influencer. So in those worlds, you're important. You're gonna, you're gonna in 15 years, someone's gonna say, hey, I used to believe that, one person shot Kennedy, but thanks to you, Alex, I think it was the CIA and a tiger mauled JFK.
If that's my legacy, I'm driving off the Vincent Thomas Bridge. That That can't be it.
But
That can't be me.
my point is this. Yes, we are like micro niche influencers in the grand scheme of things.
You radicalized me against facts, Alex.
The HARP system is real. Look at the hurricanes. The HARP system. Jesse Ventura. Fucking that
Brother.
conspiracy. Anyway, so what was I saying? I don't know. What was I saying? I understand our place in the world.
I was talking about just that there is not a higher place to go when you care about video games than where we're at, and I think that there's look.
Wait, that's kind of arrogant. Well, there's no other place to listen about video games at a higher level than Pat and Alex.
No, I'm not talking about me and you. I'm just talking about like YouTubers in general. Like, there's not like a more accepted form of information dissemination out there. I think like the most common way that people learn about old video games or something like that is they literally just go on YouTube and look up a video, right? And so for me, like thinking about that, like sometimes people need something that's actually informative or insightful or comes from a place of passion, and sometimes those people are influential. And in those cases, it's not the ones that get the most views, right? Like anytime that I hear from a fan who has something really meaningful to say to me, it's because something that we did resonated with them for real. You know what I mean? And so I think that stuff is not easy to measure. And I think that it matters. And I think that it's worth considering when you think about what shit you make.
I try to think about that. Yeah, I'm not just some like, hey, we'll throw another top 10 out there or, things like that. But speaking of the Not So Common podcast, I did get feedback from some of our listeners at PRGE. They said,
oh, yes.
I like Alex. I like what you're doing on the podcast. I've had a couple people saying, I didn't get Alex at first, but he's grown on me. Like, not like a fungus or a bad rash, but,
Like an IPA.
Like an IPA. I'm not into IPAs.
Like a Belgian triple.
Frank loves those. I'm not a beer guy in general. I just lost my taste for it.
That's okay. But see, it's not for everybody. But if you give it a little bit of time, you can find something to like.
So we've been doing the podcast now together. I think it's our 6th episode together we're doing now.
7.
7th?
Yeah.
Jeez,
this is year 7.
Year 7. Not counting the ones that you did when it was just me solo.
Yeah.
But I got word of a podcast that listened to our last episode, and because they do a podcast about like fandom and superhero stuff and movies and genre stuff, and that was a lot of our conversation last episode.
That's true.
So there's a critique as a part of the. I'm not going to tell you the name of the podcast right now.
A critique.
We'll just call them Carl and Debbie.
Okay.
A 2-person podcast, a man and woman.
You guys' days are numbered.
And we're going to listen. And we're going to listen to them. I'm going to put it at like 1.2x speed, so it goes a little first. It's only like 15, 16 minutes long. But this is the first time we're going to listen to a critique of our podcast, the last episode, where you talked about Superman and the unifying DC universe, and we talked about TwitchCon. Talked about a lot, and maybe me not enjoying strip clubs. and no holds were barred.
Did
you listen to this yet? I told you about this.
Shot.
Did you listen to this yet or no?
I saw a little bit of it. I didn't listen to it all the way through.
Okay, listen all the way through. Oh, let me share it right now if this works out, and then let's see.
Pat was looking like we were testing this technology out, and he looked like Zack Snyder doing the commentary for Watchmen on the Blu-ray, where he's standing in front of the movie, and the movie's at like a 3/4 angle.
All right, you see the podcast play button?
Uh-huh.
Do you hear this?
All right, so today's deep dive. Well, we're diving into fandom, but not just like, surface level stuff. We're going deep.
Okay.
We're talking about this conversation between Pat, you know him as the NES punk.
Right.
And his co-host, Alex Vasani.
Okay.
And you're probably thinking,
Vasani?
like, NES punk. That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, what is this, like 1985?
Wait a minute. That's a little insulting.
Vasani?
Well, that's close. But I'm still relevant. I'm not some like over-the-hill YouTuber. All right.
Exactly. Right. The dude loves his retro gaming.
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Ew.
This conversation, it goes way beyond just like 8-bit nostalgia and all that.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So what's so fascinating about this is Pat and Alex, they just kind of like casually stumble upon these really deep questions about like...
Wait, doesn't give us a lot of credit. I think we somewhat formulate these thoughts before.
That's kind of exactly what we're trying to do. That's kind of the very premise of this show, but that's fine.
Okay.
where fandom is going, what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Are we starting to treat fictional universes with the same kind of reverence as religion?
Wow.
And Pat, he just comes right out and says it.
What's that?
He's like, Superman is Jesus.
Okay, that was Alex that said that.
Yeah.
So they're not too familiar, I guess,
Wow.
between me and you. But that was you making that claim, by the way, not me.
Hey,
Whoa.
it's just a literary claim. I'm an English major. Give me some credit.
So even did you hear that? Even Carl was taken aback. He said, like,
Wow.
whoa.
Hold on a minute.
I know, right?
That's a bold statement.
It's a lot.
Okay.
But let's unpack that a bit.
Okay.
Obviously, like, he's being a little hyperbolic there.
Right, of course.
But it highlights this whole thing about how we view these characters, you know, these iconic figures.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
She
maybe
gets
it's
it.
desire for consistency.
Consistency.
Yeah, like in these huge, sprawling narratives.
Yeah.
Like we want something almost like a secular doctrine.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
She
like
gets
some kind
it.
of definitive truth
Exactly.
in these fictional worlds.
Yes.
And Pat actually sees it as,
This is about DC Comics, right?
yeah, so DC Comics has been pushing for this.
A while now.
Well, yeah, this is she's confusing. It's you that's making this argument. I'm here.
I'm pushing for this.
I'm flustered by your whole wanting a unified universe. All right, going on.
Yeah, this unified comic book universe.
Right.
And he sees that as a response to this desire.
That makes sense.
You know,
Yeah.
like remember when they did the whole New 52 reboot?
Oh, yeah.
Fans were furious.
Yeah. Not a popular move.
Because they want that continuity.
Of course they crave it.
Oh, right.
It's like, how do
They
you
crave
wrangle
it.
something as massive as, like, 8 decades of DC Comics
Yeah, I know, right?
into a single narrative?
It's impossible.
It's a huge challenge, especially with different writers and artists and directors all putting their own spin on things over the years.
It's like, what is it?
It's a mess.
It's like trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together, but someone keeps like swapping out the pieces.
Exactly.
That's what I was saying, actually. I was saying, well, you have all these different editors that come on board. You have all these different cartoons. You have all these different interpretations on TV and movies that it's impossible to have like a singular vision of each and every character. It's just not going to happen.
It is
It's
a
just
little
not.
weird. It is a little weird that this podcast is basically just like doing our podcast again, kind of.
Well, they're
But-
summarizing and giving their points.
But I'm shocked at how well they are able to like suss my thoughts down, because obviously I was rambling because I was talking off the cuff and not really like, you know.
They're able to synthesize your madness.
Yeah, exactly. I just feel I'm surprised.
All right, going on. I might fast forward through this section.
And that's why he brings up Star Wars, because love it or hate it.
Huge debate.
Right. They've at least tried to create a unified canon.
Oh man, don't even get me started on the sequels.
See?
Oh, not a fan of the sequels. I
Damn.
see. I mean,
Damn.
oh, don't go to Last Jedi. You know, you don't want the fandom positive or negative to define this podcast.
Just in case the not so common podcast listeners want to know, there is a 4-hour-long podcast on a podcast that I used to do about Star Wars. If you really want to know what I think about it, I argue with somebody much angrier than Pat for 4 straight hours about The Last Jedi.
Oh, you're not doing your Star Wars podcast anymore?
We did a new canon podcast for a while, from like
Okay.
many years back in the day for the Disney stuff. And then recently we started again with the old canon, and we're starting from the 70s and going through the like abandoned one. So different.
All right, let me see if I can get to the TwitchCon part here.
But even with the mixed reactions, the attempt itself is telling.
Okay.
It shows how whether you're successful or not.
Right.
All right, here we go. This is
Themselves.
TwitchCon.
Oh, that's so.
Kind of ironic when you think about it.
How so? Ironic, how so?
Well, Twitch is the platform that like
Okay.
ultimately decides
Mm-hmm.
whether you're successful or not.
Right.
They control the algorithm. They choose who gets promoted.
Right, of course. Yeah.
And
This was
yet
your argument,
They're
Alex.
charging people
Don't tell
Yeah.
me.
hundreds of dollars
No way.
to attend this convention.
To learn how to.
That's basically a crash course in how to play their game.
Oh man, that's brutal. It's like
Yeah.
it's like paying for tips on how to win the lottery, but the lottery is rigged by the people giving you the tips.
Exactly.
That's a great analogy.
That's exactly what it's like.
That's a great analogy.
That's what I'm talking
Debbie?
about with the synthesis. You know what I'm saying? They're whittling down our rambling conversations to like points, like we planned it.
And it plays right into this whole like hustle culture thing.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started.
Right.
Did we even bring up hustle culture? Like Twitch is kind of
we
part
were
of
talking about it in broad strokes about how like what they're asking is like, 8 hours of your day every day, no breaks, no holidays, and stuff like that. But we did not use the phrase hustle culture, I don't think.
Like anyone can make it if they just want
Success
it. bad enough.
mindset, I did say.
Just grind, grind, grind.
But the reality is,
Oh, it's the reality.
it's way more complicated than that. There's a ton of luck involved.
Sure.
Even then, the odds not really in your favor.
It's tough out there,
It is.
which is why I love Pat's solution.
Okay, what's he gonna do?
He's like, forget this whole fancy TwitchCon thing.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Great. Ditch the corporate sponsors,
Mm-hmm.
the expensive hotels,
Mm-hmm.
the whole shebang.
Yeah, what are we doing? Tell me more.
Let's just have a giant streamer meetup.
Okay, I'm
Oh,
down.
come on. Wait for it.
Where are we going?
Cherry Hill, New Jersey?
Cherry Hill. Why does that sound familiar?
We'll get to that. But first,
Bro, that was you, Alex. You recommended
didn't
going
I
to Cherry
suggest
Hill.
that? Yeah.
You did go to Cherry Hill.
Yeah.
So Debbie was like, well, hold on to that thought about Cherry Hill for later. And all
what do
right,
you think about this whole anti-TwitchCon idea?
so let's move on here a little bit further here.
Yeah.
Democrats over Republicans.
All right,
By a lot.
This is a talk about my analysis, which they kind of agree. They synthesize about my argument was that demographically, more and more younger voters are coming into the electorate, and they're by
Going to
2
blow
to
the
1
numbers away, basically.
Yeah, by 2-to-1 margin, they're going to be Democratic for the most part.
Almost 2-1.
Okay,
Wow,
just said it.
that's a
Whoa.
pretty significant margin. And he thinks this is just going to keep going in that direction.
Oh, he's doubling down.
Really?
He did this
These
whole
microphones are
back-of-the-napkin
incredible.
calculation,
Oh,
factoring in birth rates,
okay.
voter turnout projections, even COVID deaths.
This guy is thorough. I'll give him that.
Okay, well, that's too much credit. That was about 20 minutes of analysis and math. I
Yeah, I'm
did.
not
It
going to
wasn't-
say that was thorough, but
I,
it was,
I didn't spend 7
it
hours,
makes sense.
Carl.
Yeah.
But thank you for thinking I'm smarter than I am.
The man's committed to his analysis.
I'll say, but it's not just about the raw numbers, is it?
That's the thing. He's not just crunching numbers in a vacuum.
Okay.
He's also paying attention to like the political climate.
Yeah, of course, the overall vibe.
And he believes certain issues
Mhm.
are driving this generational wedge that we're seeing.
Like what? What kind of issues?
He specifically mentions the overturning of Roe v. Wade
Oh, yeah, it's a big one.
as like a major turning point.
By the way, today the Georgia Supreme Court or Georgia court overturned the 22-week ban. Now it's 6 weeks. You have to get an abortion. That came out today. By the way, that actually happened.
Wait. Explain this again.
So it was 22 weeks you had to get an abortion in Georgia, and that law was on the books after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and they overturned it, one of the courts in Georgia. Now you have to get an abortion in 6 weeks or less.
Oh.
That came out today. So
Okay.
they stayed the order for 22 weeks. So all I'm going to say is this: if you disagree with that, go out and vote in Georgia this election. All right, going forward.
Definitely mobilized a lot of voters, especially young women.
Oh yeah, it
And
will.
Pat's argument is that the GOP's
Jesus
stance on
Christ.
this issue,
Mhm.
among others, has alienated a whole generation of potential voters.
So it's like he's seeing this perfect storm brewing,
Exactly.
demographic shifts,
Yep.
hot button issues,
Mhm.
and a generation that's like politically energized.
And he goes so far as to say that unless the GOP makes some serious changes,
Yeah.
they won't win the popular vote in a presidential election for
For how long?
decades.
Wow. That's a bold statement.
That's right.
I don't
That's
know
right,
if that's
Carl.
bold. I don't know if that's bold.
It's happened once in the past 30 years. What do
I
you
don't know
mean?
if that's bold. That's
That's
like
not bold.
that's the thing that we say every single fucking time.
It's not bold. I mean, no one thinks that Trump's going to win the popular vote. Even MAGA people know that's not going to happen. That's
Yeah.
not controversial.
Insane.
He's really putting it all out there.
Oh, he knows it.
He's confident in his analysis.
He is. And you know what?
Wait,
This is where it gets kind of meta.
meta how?
Oh.
I thought we were talking about the election.
We are. But remember how this whole conversation started?
How did it start? Remind me.
Fandom.
Right.
What?
Superman.
Yeah.
The search for meaning in these fictional universes.
Okay. Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
So Pat, he brings it full circle.
How so?
He starts talking about how the intensity of feeling around these political issues,
Okay.
the debates,
Mhm.
the activism, the almost like religious fervor, it's
Yeah.
not that different from the passionate fandom that we were talking about
So it
earlier.
has to- it's
Was
all
that,
connected.
wait, was that
I
you,
think
Alex?
that
You said that.
it's-
That was
I
you.
don't remember, but I'm just gonna say it sounds like something I would say.
It sounds like something smarter than what we actually discussed. Go on.
Like our political identities are becoming like fandoms themselves.
Exactly.
Huh.
He's saying
So
that whether
obtuse
you're
of an
arguing
idea,
about
what
the
I'm
latest
saying.
Marvel movie
Right.
or the upcoming election,
Yeah.
you're tapping into something fundamental about human nature.
Okay. What's that?
Our need to belong, to believe,
Mm-hmm.
to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that passion can lead
Oh,
to.
yeah.
Can I hire these two just to like summarize our podcast every week? Because they're getting across our points better than we did.
Fucking probably. If you don't want to actually listen to us, just listen to this shit, and then you don't have to actually listen to us.
Yeah, in 15 minutes, you can get we
So-
railed on about for 2 hours.
A little
Yeah.
out of hand
Totally.
on both sides.
On both sides, but
All right, let's fast forward to the end here.
awkward encounters
Oh no.
in strip clubs.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Here's the
Part
good
of same
stuff.
Tapestry.
Exactly.
There we go.
Right.
This
It
one.
is. And in a world that's like
What?
increasingly
Yeah.
fragmented,
Mhm.
polarized,
Right.
maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Maybe as long as we can remember,
What's that?
be respectful of other people,
Of course.
who have different opinions.
Right. And maybe
Well, that's not going to happen. Let's cut that.
try to
Yeah, I
understand
mean,
where
I
they're
don't
coming
know.
from.
Exactly.
Right.
It's about finding common ground.
Exactly. But before we get too philosophical here,
Yeah.
remember how Pat mentioned those awkward encounters
Oh no.
in strip clubs?
Yeah, this should be good.
This is a whole other tangent, but it's kind
Do
of a
they know what?
Oh,
our
they're gonna get spicy now. Okay.
tale
About
shattering illusions.
okay, I like it.
So he was reminiscing about his first ever trip to a strip club.
A classic coming of age story.
Right. And he's at this club feeling all awkward and out of place.
I can imagine.
Right. And he's about to get a lap dance from this woman named
Goldie.
Goldie. Like a
Like how you have some Goldie. Yep, that was her name. That's that's a stripper name.
heart of gold.
You would think, right?
Yeah.
But
Heart
as
of gold.
Pat tells it,
Oh.
Goldie,
yeah.
she proceeds to kill the mood
How so?
by
Well,
announcing her career aspirations.
No, you're kidding.
Career aspirations in the middle of a lap dance.
In the middle of a lap dance.
What did she say?
She tells him she's studying to be a radiologist.
A radiologist.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so they got the timing right. It was before the dance. It was like literally on the line to get into the little booth, but it was close enough. It was like right before the it killed the mood regardless.
Talk about a mood killer.
That's one way to clear a room.
Right. Pat's like, dude,
One way to clear a room.
fantasy
She just
here.
wanted tips.
And you're hitting me with medical school.
Not exactly the stuff fantasies are made of. But hey, at least she's got goals.
Right. But it totally throws him off.
I bet.
He starts thinking about like how much money she must be making.
Yeah.
All the student loans she must have.
Her reality sets in.
And suddenly the whole lap dance just feels
Well,
off.
Yeah, the illusion is shattered.
Exactly. And it
Did you
made me
tip her well?
wonder-
I don't know, like $20 for a lap dance. I probably gave her $5. This is like 99. That's what the cost
That was like
back then.
$200 in today money. Yeah.
It's 200. That's a Joe Biden economy right
Yeah.
there. That's the greedflation of strip clubs.
with online personalities too?
What do you mean? Like streamers and YouTubers?
Yeah. Are we so caught up in like
If what?
the curated images, the highlight reels,
Right.
that we forget there's a real person behind the screen?
Wow, so they're making a point we never did. They're associating Goldie at the strip club with our earlier talks about TwitchCon and influencers. This
Yeah.
is brilliant. This is way more smart than we were.
Personally, I don't see that one as good as I see the Superman political one. I feel like that one's
Yeah.
pretty strong. Like if that's a connection that they drew themselves, I think that's great. But
All
I
right,
don't
we're
think
almost
they-
done.
With their own lives and struggles?
Exactly. Someone with their own dreams, their own problems, probably their own student
So
loan.
easy to forget that.
It's like we build these pedestals.
Don't have these expectations.
And when the reality doesn't match up, it's jarring.
It can be. It can be.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it ties back to Pat's whole point about fandom and belonging.
Well, this is, I think, your point.
Also,
We crave authenticity,
we do.
but we're also bombarded with these manufactured versions of it.
That's the world we live in.
So where do we draw the line?
That's a great question.
Isn't it?
It is.
It's a tough one.
It is, especially as technology keeps blurring the lines between what's real and what's not.
Right. And as we become even more reliant on these online connections.
Our virtual communities.
Exactly. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
Please.
let's bring it back to Pat's wild conversation.
Okay.
What?
Remember how we wanted to ditch TwitchCon for a massive streamer meetup in Cherry Hill?
Ah,
That was
yes, Cherry
Alex.
Hill.
It was me.
Awkward lap dances and unexpected career advice.
Right.
Everybody
Oh,
thinks
Carl.
everybody thinks I'm you and that I'm Ian.
Places.
These experiences that are just
Wow.
raw, unfiltered, maybe even a little messy.
Authentic.
Exactly.
Because maybe that's where the real connections are.
Right. When we drop the
They're
pretenses,
filters.
the carefully crafted online personas,
Stick the
You can just
landing.
be yourselves.
and just be human.
Exactly.
And isn't that what fandom is
Hey.
all about?
What is it about?
No.
Finding your people,
Your tribe.
Oh.
the ones who get you,
Who understand you.
who share your passions,
Or interests.
even your quirks,
Exactly.
the ones who don't judge you
Yeah.
when you geek out over a vintage video game.
Or get sidetracked by a radiologist in training.
Exactly.
Okay, I think that's enough of that. But all right, they're making some nice points about summarizing up what we spoke about, connecting the dots that we were too dumb to connect on the fly. So yeah, you know what? That wasn't bad for an analysis. They didn't really critique us too hard, and
It's funny. It's funny just hearing them digest it. You know what I mean? Like hearing them process what we said with like as if they were listening very, very closely to words that I was saying and coming up with like a very clear, good explanation of it is just very wild to me.
a cogent summary and analysis.
Rarely happens to me at any time.
So all right, a little white lie. That was not a real podcast you listened to. That was an experimental Google product called Notebook LM that came out
Scary as fuck. Yeah.
that came out about like a week ago, I believe, to the public. And that was just one piece of this. So what Notebook LM does is you feed it web pages, sources, YouTube videos, podcasts, and it will collect and collate all those sources and spit out a whole guide for you, an FAQ, a table of contents, a briefing document, and you can ask it to generate a 2-person podcast that summarizes it in a conversation like that. And
So neither of those people were real.
they were not real.
They're just complete AI fabrications, and all of that was done using computer power.
That was all AI just spitting out a summary and analysis of what we spoke about.
Very, very scary to me. The implications of it are so upsetting that it's almost like terrifying. Is that weird?
Yeah, but to me, it's like the most useful, the most useful AI I've seen so far, because it's not generative bullshit. It's not stealing anything in terms of like making a new image or a video of something that it just literally said, okay, what do these two people talk about? And throwing in a little bit of, college level or post-college, analysis and spitting it back up, spitting back out to us.
As a user, right? I'm impressed, right? As like a guy who might need some notes taken on a book or something like that, I'm impressed, of course, right? However, as a man who makes things, I'm terrified. Like, for example, like what I was saying earlier, like somebody could just put your podcast that is 2 hours long into this thing and listen to it, quote unquote, in 15 minutes and never hear you. And then maybe that could be easier than digesting information. And then you realize you like Deborah and Ken or whatever better than Pat and Alex. And then you just put
I would hope.
you just start putting raw information into the notebook, and you get podcasts to order on any topic that you want.
Yeah, but it's
and you forget who Pat and Alex are.
The funny thing is they had personalities. Like they even had little jokes thrown in. That was to me the most alarming thing. He brought back, if you're in Cherry Hill, good place for learning about strippers and whatever he said. I was like, wow, that's actually a joke.
It's like an adroit joke that's actually like a funny kind of like roast of Cherry Hill.
It was a callback joke.
Yeah.
Is what comedians call it. Like you're calling back to something earlier. That's not something I was expecting when I listened to that. I was like, wow.
But it also demonstrated knowledge of Cherry Hill, which is also scary.
Well, because the knowledge that we spoke about, unless it pulled some Cherry Hill knowledge about being a dingy city across from Philadelphia.
No, I'm not saying it's dingy. It's just not like a it's not Philadelphia.
Cherry Hill was probably, honestly, when you look at the map, that's like Gotham City. I'm not even kidding, because Gotham City is supposed to be like South Jersey. The only problem is it's when you look at the map, it's like South Jersey.
It's debatable. It's
but
debatable.
But it's like
Gotham
South
is.
Jersey, Atlantic City side, and Cherry Hill is the west side, southwest. But like Cherry Hill is like Gotham City.
It's like Gotham Downs.
Because there's not a city in Southeast Jersey that's close to how Gotham City would look, but Cherry Hill is like, or Trenton is like closer.
Honestly, you should contact their Chamber of Commerce, because that's got to be better than what they're doing.
So anyway, I shared this with you before, Alex.
Yeah.
This notebook thing, besides a summary, gives you a timeline of events it spits out.
Like in time, like we were looking at the timeline earlier, and it was like 1992, Superman dies.
Yeah.
And then we like go from there. 1997, Pat gets the VHS tapes of Star Wars Special Edition. Like,
yeah, look at this. 1999, Star Wars Episode 1. The Phantom Menace premieres. Pat, age 19, which was correct, is disappointed by the film. Alex, then around 10 years old, has a more positive view of the movie. And were
10 years old?
Around 10, right?
I was 11.
All right, close.
Yeah.
Early 2000s, disillusioned by the Phantom Menace, Pat sells his Star Wars toy collection. That is true.
On the timeline.
Like, I don't remember talking about some of these things.
Yeah, you did, for sure, yeah. Pat accurately predicts the outcome. Pat's is scheduled to attend Syracuse Retro GameCon, October 12th to 13th.
November 2024, the next U.S. presidential election will be held. Pat predicts a victory for Kamala Harris by a significant margin in the popular vote. Cast of characters.
Why is David Hayter in there?
Pat recalls an encounter at the convention. All right, this is how it describes us. Pat, co-host of the Nostricon podcast, a self-proclaimed numbers guy. That was a joke, by the way. He enjoys retro gaming, is passionate about Superman. No, that was you.
Yeah.
And leans Democratic in his political views. He expresses anxiety about the future of American politics. This was you. So they got
This was
this
mostly
wrong.
me, yeah.
Regardless of who wins the upcoming presidential election, that was you. You're the one that was saying
Expressed anxiety, yes.
Alex, co-host, he provides a contrasting perspective to Pat, often playing the role of devil's advocate. Oh, that's kind of true.
Depends on who you think the devil is, but yes.
And then it mentions the people mentioned in passing. George Lucas,
Timothy
James
Zahn,
Gunn,
George Lucas,
Sam Raimi, Taylor
J.D.
Swift,
Vance,
John
Mitt
McCain.
Romney, the hero of the podcast, Mitt Romney.
Pat expresses strong support for Romney, both as a politician and a person. Hey, that's right, my man Mitt. Oh, this is great.
Like a glove.
And Vince Vaughn, you brought up Vince Vaughn. So
God
anyway,
bless Vince Vaughn.
This isn't a PSA or advertisement for Notebook LM. And hell, like Google, and there's a whole website like the graveyard of Google products they abandoned.
Yeah.
But this is the one I don't want them to abandon.
I don't think this should exist from like an ethical standpoint, but it is unbelievable.
I don't think this is unethical because I don't think it's creating anything new. It's just summarizing.
I like agree, but I feel like
It's too scary.
it's too scary. Yeah, it's too scary, and it could disrupt. Like I really think the podcast thing is scary.
So I also ran the my AVGN versus Pat in combat video.
Yeah,
Because I wanted to hear what the hell it came up with.
Yeah.
And it came up with a summary, like an analysis that I never intended the video to be.
is this Daria and Kyle again?
Yeah, you want to hear it? It's the same people.
Yeah.
But I'm going to play the last like 2 minutes of this. Because this video came out at this point, 3 years ago? This video?
Yeah.
And
The
it's just
combat video?
Yeah, to me, it's a goofy inside joke
Is it
video.
only 3 years?
Yeah, it was right before the pandemic. It was like end of 2019.
So that was 5 years ago?
Oh, sorry, it was 5 years ago. Holy shit, that was 5 years ago.
You fucked me up for a second. I was about to be like, what?
Okay,
yeah,
I'm
we're there.
gonna play this at 1.2x speed. It's only like 5 minutes, but I'll just do the last.
Yeah,
couple
whatever.
minutes. Yeah, we got a podcast here. All right.
Satisfying ending. It was about keeping you glued to that screen, pumping in more coins.
So combat and its infinite tank battles were all about maximizing playtime. Makes sense.
Right. Back then, there were no achievements to unlock, no online leaderboards.
No.
You just played until your parents told you to turn the darn thing off.
It's funny, right? When you compare it to how complex games are today.
Yeah.
But even with all those bells and whistles, there's still something special about those early gaming experiences.
I agree, and that's where this YouTube battle really gets interesting. Because combat stops being just a game. It becomes this shared language, a source of nostalgia, in-jokes, all those things that come with having a shared history.
They are espousing on these are not untrue things that they are saying. The AI is saying that was not my intent of the video.
They're like
I never.
fleshing out like little things that are like, just like the fact is, right? You're two different people and you're using the same game. And then they kind of like watched your video and like pulled some extra work into there.
The AI people watched the video in theory and made a comparison to how games morphed over time versus the simplicity of an arcade style experience where it was all about keeping you focused as long as possible to get quarters. And that's how the early console games were all about high score. They didn't realize that we have to create narratives, and we have to create progress in games versus high scores, right? That was not my intent in doing the video. The intent was to make a goofy fucking video that I thought was funny. Like that was saying a little bit, but yeah.
That's scary too, though, because now listen to this. Now you can listen to these to Kenny and Delilah or whatever their names are, and you can Goldie and Han, and you can get critical thinking from them that wasn't present in the original text. So now you're attacking the idea of essays, because now if you can use this to write an essay, now you're not even getting anything out of an essay. So now it's getting scarier and scarier for me. Like,
but there's always been critical analysis of stories that are 1,000 years old.
I am an English, like that's my history in higher education is in English. And the idea that somebody would do this, if I was like an English professor or if I was like a student, like I don't think that people would continue to have the skill to write essays within 4
Generation?
years.
It'd be gone?
within 4 years if this exists.
All right, let's listen to the end of this. There's a little more.
The way
People get
AVGN
dumber.
and Pat play off of each other, it's like they're tapping into years of inside jokes and memories.
Well, we are.
Like that moment where after this like super intense match, their entire game collection magically transforms into a mountain of combat cartridges.
Don't even get me started. I mean, talk about a certain, right. But that's the thing about a game like Combat. It's so simple, so stripped down that it can become this, I don't know, this legendary thing in our minds.
A symbol of a simpler time, maybe, when a couple of blocky tanks and a basic maze were all you needed to disappear into another world.
It's like those stories, right? People digging through their attics, blowing dust off his old cardboard box, and bam, there it is.
The Atari.
The Atari. Joysticks, cartridges, the whole shebang. You blow on that Combat cartridge just for good measure.
It's practically a reflex at this point.
Right.
All right, well, that's what the AI's got to discover, is that you didn't blow on Atari carts because they were protected because of the way the cartridges, they spring in the bottom when you put it in. But that aside, this is kind of poetic. This is more poetic than I planned on it being.
And just like that, you're right back in your childhood living room. Except this time, you're not worried about your mom yelling at you to turn the game off. But it's more than just a nostalgia trip, isn't it? Combat, even with its simplicity, it marks this turning point in gaming history.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Before Atari, video games, they were these things. Huge, mysterious cabinets in these dark arcades, and they ate your quarters like nobody's business.
True. And then suddenly, there's Combat sitting on your shelf right next to the family's record collection.
It was revolutionary. Games weren't just for arcades anymore, they were for everyone.
Democratized gaming, like you said. And it's amazing to think that all those complex games we have now, the massive online worlds, the intricate stories, they all have roots in something as basic as Combat.
It's that old saying, right? You got to crawl before you can walk.
Okay.
Combat was those first few wobbly steps.
That's a much better video than I created.
Just writing like very generic but like well worded like
But they're
observations.
right.
They are right.
They're 100% right. We didn't even really talk about that was the first pack-in game to
It has
a console.
no style. It has no context to a time period, but it technically works and represents critical thinking.
Not
It's very
counting. Okay, you nerds out there. Yeah, the Man of Box Odyssey had pack-in games. They weren't real video games.
Yeah.
Combat was the first game that was packed in.
It's
with a
still
console.
it's so scary. It's so scary, dude.
All right. That's all about that. I think it's fascinating.
It
I
is
didn't-
absolutely fascinating.
If it wasn't for the little there's like little weird audio inserts that shouldn't be there here and there.
Yeah, little
you can
clips
tell.
and stuff.
But I don't think most people could tell that's AI.
It just sounded like you were like scrubbing around the file,
Correct.
like to the untrained ear.
sometimes there's one too many interruptions or interludes of like but it sounds like a fairly natural conversation. And this is experimental.
Yeah.
So imagine, if Google plays around with this in a couple of years, that's what's scary. But they have to keep this locked down to summaries and not, hey, make a 3-hour podcast that people can upload and pretend it's theirs. That's would be bad.
But it's already close to that. Like, I don't know, it's just scary, but also it probably took like 1,000 gallons of water to do.
1,000. They burned down 2 acres of the rainforest,
Dude,
just for this.
Look up AI water usage. That shit will freak you the fuck out.
I thought it was just electricity used, but water, I guess. Okay, stop, the
dude.
shit, Pat.
It's fucking crazy, dude.
So
AI
was that
is
honestly,
the scariest shit ever.
Honestly, was that? You said scary, but was that more impressive than you thought it would be?
It's the thing that's impressive to me about it, that because I've interacted with AI a lot, is like the natural way that the people talk to each other really sell the idea. Because like one problem that I have with like absorbing information is I always try to read books while I'm driving. And
Wait, I'm sorry. You try to read books
like
while
with
you're driving?
with audiobook, like by listening to them.
Okay. You're not reading that. Okay.
No, not like with my eyes. Just like I try to like crush books while I'm driving.
You're not an
And
influencer destroying your McLaren on a highway while texting.
Yeah, no. But I have trouble like following a story that's written. Like when I'm driving a car. It's for some reason the way that the road requires my brain to be kind of just makes it hard for me to listen. I don't know if that's a common thing, but that's my thing. And then this is crazy because I can like get a summary and it's like people talking, and I have no problem with podcasts while I'm driving because it's kind of like a conversation. And so in that way, I'm able to pay attention to the information and absorb the information better. So the fact that this is like podcasting it to me in a way, and like in a way that's digestible to me, even though it's fake, is like very, very weird and upsetting. It's really weird because it's like programming me, It's weird. It's just weird.
Well, okay, I'm not as scared in terms of that. I actually thought it's interesting thinking about, well, these are the conclusions AI got from our conversation, and they were mostly on the money. There was a couple things they extrapolated out a little bit too far, but those were the points we were trying to get conveyed to the audience.
100%.
So I'm like, okay, then we kind of did our job if AI understood us without going too far off the bridge. You know what I mean? Like, so all right, well that's that.
Yeah, 100%. It's
They're
shocking.
my new friends.
It's scary. Kylie and Dan. What are they? What did you call them? Ken and Deborah?
Carl
and Debbie. Oh yeah, okay.
So the Mr. McMahon documentary came out on Netflix a week and a half ago.
fucking Christ, man. Yeah.
So you know the wrestling business a little bit. I've been a wrestling fan since I was probably 4 years old.
Yeah, I've only learned it. I read like this like crazy book about a bunch of like the bad stuff that happened. I watched some of those Vice episodes, but I didn't grow up with it. But you know, like at the office back in the day, all the boys were crazy for it and stuff.
Wrestling with Shadows is one of the more famous wrestling documentaries because it came out in the late 90s. In the height of the Attitude Era, people say it's probably the most popular wrestling's ever been nationally. I don't think that's controversial to say. In the late 90s, we'll say 98, 99-ish.
I remember when it was like core to American culture for a while.
Absolutely
it was crazy.
was.
Yeah.
Along with Crash TV and Jerry Springer and loud, obnoxious talk shows and Girls Gone Wild, titties on the screen. Like it all was like part and parcel of American culture in the late 90s.
Yeah, South Park and all that shit.
So
Blink-182.
Wrestling with Shadows was a documentary crew that followed around Bret Hart for like a year, up to and including the 1997 Survivor Series, the Montreal Screwjob, where Bret Hart famously, he was under a 10-year contract, was going to get out of it because Vince decided he couldn't pay him, but he was champion, and Bret said, I don't want to lose the belt, the championship to Shawn Michaels in Canada. I don't want to do it. And Vince said, okay, that's fine. We'll have a schmoz. You won't lose it. DQ, you'll drop the belt the next night. But then Vince double-crossed Bret for real, like real life, and then had the bell ring to have Bret Hart lose by submission to Shawn Michaels. So that documentary included all that in the behind-the-scenes thing. So that was a very important part of like wrestling history. So that documentary is part of this documentary, like in terms of the events. But the Mr. McMahon documentary looks at Vince growing up, taking control of the WWF at the time in the early 80s after he purchased it from his father, Vince McMahon Sr., how he then dismantled the old 80s wrestling territory system that existed. Up until, I'm going to say, the late 80s, it was really a thing. After that, kind of went away. And then all the scandals that he's been involved with, and really trying to get to the heart of the issue of, like, who is Vince McMahon the person? And is it really different at all than the Mr. McMahon character who became, the most famous wrestling heel bad guy probably the last 30 years? And the answer, at the end of it, you learn no. The on-camera persona, Mr. McMahon, is Vince McMahon. They are one and the same person.
It's like his fantasy version of himself
but
that he
not
wishes
even.
He could fully be. Yeah.
Like, it's just allows him to get away with things in front of the camera that he was, to a lot of degree, getting away with behind the scenes and how he treated people.
Yeah, I guess for most people it would be their fantasy, but it's more like for Vince, he just had the money to like continue to be that fucking crazy in his entire life.
And he went unstopped for 30 years until he was finally kicked out of the company after the sale, last year. It was like, okay, you're done. You're not coming back.
But then he was back, right?
Then he did come back, but then they kicked him out finally again.
Absolutely insane.
So,
and he's like, what, 100 years old now?
He's almost 80. But I guess the larger point is this, because there's lots of scandals that we can go through, and there's going to be a lot of spoilers, but if you followed wrestling history and kept up with it, there wasn't really much in this 6-part Netflix documentary that was brand new. But it was a nice summary of the business. They had awesome archival footage of things that they went deep into, like the vaults of WWE's vaults of
it
stuff.
Looks, I just watched the trailer, but it looks just beautifully researched.
Yeah, it's Bill Simmons' group that produced this.
Yeah.
I think he helped with the original 30 for 30s when he was at ESPN, I believe.
Those are like the best. I don't even have that sports love in me like some people do, but God, those are so
great documentary series.
Yeah.
Go watch the 3-part on the 86 Mets even if you're not a Mets fan. It's like the most crazy thing ever. And being a Mets fan is awful, by the way. It's like Charlie Brown with the Lucy pulling the football every year. I mean, I forgot to talk about that in the intro, how awful it is being a Mets fan, but this past week has been insane. The game.
It was rough being a Dodgers fans for a while too, but then we started winning, so it was all good.
Yeah, can you Dodger fans relax and not throw things at players in the outfield? The Padres fans, you look like trash right now, LA fans. Anyway, so the larger conversation I want to have is about, Vince McMahon had lots of scandals that happened. Going back to the early 80s, the Jimmy Snuka murder, allegedly, if you heard about that.
I just did a bit on it in the Chilluminati podcast like last week, actually.
Okay, so then we'll see if I'm correct in summarizing it. I believe it was 81. It was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and Snuka's girlfriend, living girlfriend at the time.
Yep.
They found her. Her head was basically bashed in. She was dead.
It said the coroner's report said it was consistent with like a moving head hitting a stationary object, which is just so fucked up. Yeah.
So he was brought in by the police. And then somehow magically Vince went to the police department, and then somehow Snuka was let free after that.
That's exactly right.
For like 30 fucking years, people are like, what the hell happened? Until they finally re-indicted him, when he was an old man and had dementia, like 8, 9, 10 years ago.
Yeah. And stomach cancer.
Snuka was one of the biggest stars in the company at the time, if not the biggest star in the early 80s. And a lot of people thought at the time that, well, Vince probably just came with like a bag of money and paid off the police or what have you. That was a thought, because like the evidence was so like overwhelming that this was a homicide. She didn't just like trip and fall and hit her head on something. And it goes from that, like that's a scandal that doesn't get talked about enough. We'll just say it does, but like the mainstream wouldn't know that. But then it like fast forwards. It goes through a lot of the history. Obviously, him breaking up the territories he wasn't smarter than the territories. He basically just went against his father's wishes and just bought out the best wrestlers from each territory and started promoting in the territories on TV and buying airtime. That's basically how Vince McMahon succeeded. That's it. And him getting all the credit for WrestleMania, the documentary said he named it. He did not. Howard Finkel, remember the announcer? That was the famous. He's the one that is credited for naming it WrestleMania, by the way. Because remember, before that, they didn't say that. It was like the Brawl to End It All was the first two pay-per-views or special events was in pay-per-view. And they had the one on MTV before that. So WrestleMania was technically their third big event that they did, not the first one in 85, during the rock and wrestling era. But no, Vince was good in that he did realize this should be entertainment and make it larger in life and bring in celebrities, bringing in Liberace, bringing in Cyndi Lauper, bringing in Muhammad Ali into the first WrestleMania. Mr. T was a big thing pre-WrestleMania and WrestleMania 2, I believe. So there was like a 2-year span. So he was smart in doing that, but it wasn't because the wrestling was any better. It was just adding the glitz and glamour that was missing in a lot of the territories, like the AWA, in Mid-South wrestling and things like that. That's what it was.
Wow, I'm looking at this map right now, and it's really not like a few guys that he ran over. He basically took out
almost everyone in like 6-7 years.
Yeah,
from mid 80s to 90. Like by the early
insane.
90s. By the early 90s, the territory system was largely gone. It was dead.
I mean, but I don't give people that much credit for doing obvious things like the wrestling thing. Obviously, like he did have the vision, but dude is like such a piece of shit.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, yeah, he had a vision, but he went back on his father's word and the words of all the other territory promoters were told, your territories will be safe when my son runs a company. And he just went back on that entirely.
Yeah, exactly.
But then it fast forwards to like the main scandal from the early 90s was like 93 was the big steroid trial where Hogan, they brought in Hogan to give testimony against Vince, but then he backed out and said, "Oh, Vince never told me to do steroids." And they had Dr. Schultz, and I think I don't know if Jesse Ventura was on the stand. And talked about that. Jesse Ventura tried to form. This is a larger known story. Jesse Ventura tried to start a union for wrestlers before WrestleMania 2. Hogan ratted him out because he's a fucking rat. And General Hogan, he was Vince's golden goose, and so that's why Jesse Ventura went away for a bit before he came back in a few years. Vince did a lot of dastardly things, obviously. Then it fast forward to 1997. And by the way, Bret Hart's the best person that's interviewed because he tells you how it is. Him and Tony Atlas, who was an older wrestler from 70s to early 80s in WWF. They just told it how it is. One of these scandals that I don't know if he talked about in Illuminati or not was the Ring Boy scandal. This is one that wasn't really nationally known well. It was reported on the time by some of the newspaper columnists that they did talk about and were interviewed. So there was a scandal that happened where allegedly ring boys, young boys that were hired to set up the ring at events and take it down, were sexually harassed and molested by 3 different employees of the WWF. This is like mid-'80s stuff. We'll say early to late 80s in that area there. And that it was like an open secret that things were going on, but nothing was done about it. Vince did nothing about it. One of the kids ended up suing as an adult and got paid off for it. I've seen an interview with Roddy Piper where he starts to cry and admits that he saw stuff happening. And it's almost... Oh, yeah. There's a on YouTube, like, random interview with him. There's like wrestling YouTube video channels that existed like 15, 20 years ago where he like starts to like tear up. And it's not clear if like something happened to him when he was younger or if he saw things and didn't stop it back then. We're talking like probably early 80s stuff.
Yeah.
Because he was young back then. Piper got into it when he was like early 20s. He was like huge at WrestleMania.
Somebody was talking about something like this more recently too, right? Somebody like John Cena or somebody was talking about. I forget who it was.
I don't think Cena probably was. Cena's Mr. Company Man, which is one of the things Cena's interviewed, The Rock's interviewed, Triple H interviewed. They got a lot of nice people interviewed here. But both obviously rah-rah WWE and the anti sort of stance. So they did a good job. And they got, obviously Vince was there for tons of it, except for the last episode, which we'll get into. But it's one thing to admire a man for being a brilliant business mind. And whether or not you agree how much of it was being brilliant versus just buying out the competition and just getting the best talent and then just squeezing the life out of them versus, having...
I feel anybody could have done what he did with his business, but he did it easily because he was such a fucking piece of shit.
He was way more ruthless in his competition.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
He didn't have like amazing ideas. He just is a fucking nut. Yeah.
Because you had decades of wrestling being territorial where, hey, you have your piece, we have our piece. But cable TV made it possible to see regional stuff nationwide. And that's what Vince saw in the early 80s, right? He was smart for doing that. No one else tried to do that except him. So there were so many scandals with Vince. And this is even before you get to the current federal investigation into sex trafficking, sexual slavery that allegedly that happened with his employee. And then pawning her off to using her as a bargaining chip to re-sign Brock Lesnar. That's brought up in the documentary. That was news earlier in the year.
How is that even in the realm of okay from anyone who knows about it?
Well, that's the thing. My point is this: is that Vince doing these awful things is not new. It's been known for decades. He was a piece of shit, but everyone ignored it because they liked the wrestling product. And the talent and people around him never called him out on it. For the most part, some people did. Some people, sued him successfully. There was one talent who I won't say their name. I don't think it's appropriate, but it is known who she was. That was a talent there like 15 years ago or so that ended up suing because she said like Vince forced, her to do a sexual favor on her or else she'd be like fired, something like that. So you always hear these things throughout the decades. People sort of took it like, well, it is not a big deal or who knows. But the fact that this huge company, a publicly traded company now for over like almost 25 years, allowed this man to get away with all of this, it's so frustrating because it could have been and should have been stopped and no one had the guts to do it because he was the man, right?
Well, I think also like if you're a person who is making a lot of money because you're famous, right? And your only skill has nothing to do with making yourself famous. You know what I mean? Like you probably don't have a lot of education because you probably spent your years where you might be in higher education training to do this. You also you get hit in the head a lot. So like your shit just gets fucked up as you get older. Like
maybe
you're just fucking scared all the time. You're on all kinds of drugs and shit. You have like this huge macho complex. I can't even imagine to the degree to which people think I'm like the Big Lebowski compared to like how macho people must think wrestlers are. The thought of it just stresses me out. So going against Vince, who is basically God, in the world of wrestling. He owns wrestling. He is wrestling. It's going to be you not just throwing your life away, but becoming like the villain of everyone whose lives you will destroy. Maybe there's just a lot riding on it. And then also Vince McMahon is not like, self-made really. You know what I mean? He's got a lot of privilege.
Oh, no, he bought his father's business, which was established. Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying is also like he never wasn't powerful to stand up to. There was never a chance for a single wrestler to ever compete with Vince on a legal level or on any kind of level. So
not once he had control of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the union busting thing is just another just despicable, like just taking the voice from these people. And so for them not to act out, I don't think it's necessarily great that they did that. I think that if you see something like that, you should definitely speak out against it. But you can kind of see how fear of being destroyed from all angles could make you hesitate.
So Tony Atlas, who's, again, these are big men. Tony Atlas, I've seen him in person. He was at a convention, was it Retro World Expo in Connecticut like 5-6 years ago? We're talking, this guy's in his 60s, but would crush you like a grape, right? He's in the documentary saying, by the way, it was funny because he had like a cut off business shirt on with like a tie. It looked hysterical. It looked like Bam Bam from Flintstones. Even said in regards to the Ring Boy stuff and being like people being sexually assaulted, he said on camera, "Oh yeah, Pat Patterson, who used to be a wrestler for WWF, he was Vince's right-hand man for decades. Oh yeah, Pat Patterson grabbed my pecker." And then the interviewer was like, "Excuse me, what did you say?" He's like, "Oh yeah, he grabbed my pecker." And they said, "Well, did you go to Vince?" He said, "What am I going to do about it? Pat Patterson's the booker. Like, what am I going to do?"
Yeah, exactly.
I have no recourse. They would just fire him. Like, they would have fired him.
Yeah,
that was his livelihood.
Exactly. It's right there. It's like the writing's on the wall on that stuff. Like, it's not like the fact that he took everything over was so bad for everyone except for him.
And so it did try to go back to his childhood a bit because it said his foster father or stepfather was abused him as a kid. He didn't meet Vince McMahon Sr. until he was like 12 years old, and then was brought into the business in the 70s. And so they make the good point that like this was since Vince had no control as a child, this was his way growing up. He had to control everything. Like he had to control every person in the room and manipulate everything in his mind. Like that's how he operated.
It's a perfect example of why being rich is dangerous. Like,
well, the wrong people can't be rich.
It's
for sure.
That's what I'm saying. It's like mutants. Like we should be, people treat like Magneto because he's like got a really good power. Like people want to lock him down, but people don't care about the guys.
Can we not talk about X-Men every episode? But sure.
Listen. Just because you don't subscribe to my religion, okay?
Well, I want Carl and Debbie to talk about X-Men all the time.
Look, they're gonna think it's you. So I'm just saying, like that type of thing. Like people they're like, well, it's like a public safety issue to have somebody so powerful, so driven by negative, like just like evil, basically, just like a fucking sociopathic, brutal monster of a person with $1 billion is like should be illegal.
Should be illegal. Total aside, did you see Elon Musk at Trump's rally the other day? Did you see?
Yeah. Do you know that they're finding his fucking technology in like bombed out Russian shit? Like he's helping them. Like it's crazy. It's like James Bond shit.
Yeah.
James Bond shit.
He just wants to be loved by someone, Elon. He realized, no, we all think you're a fucking massive dork.
Literally,
he's gone down this rabbit hole.
It's literally just
Hey, Elon. By the way, Elon, MAGA people aren't buying Teslas. Just to let you know, buddy. They're not your audience. Just to let you know, they're not the ones buying your cars.
Just the Cybertrucks.
Oh, no. Well, those are just like hipster douchebags for the most part.
Yeah.
Sorry for the 2 people out there listening that have a Cybertruck. You just lost $100,000 for a shit car.
I don't feel bad for you if you have one.
Anyway, I see them more and more, but they still have a recall of most of them, and they're not good. But that aside, so Vince, not a good person. But what's interesting is the argument that people were making By the way, he said, "Oh, I'm not the Mr. McMahon character." But then again, everyone else is like, "Oh yeah, he's the same person."
Yes, he fucking is.
He's making out with all these younger women. He's making them making Trish Stratus crawl like a dog, bark like a dog, and he even had a storyline. And this was well known before this. They put this in a WWE documentary that he pitched the idea to have Stephanie McMahon, his daughter, who was an on-screen character as well, be impregnated by someone, and it turns out to be Vince.
What?
So that's the one thing you didn't know. So imagine being a man.
So a lot of these psychopaths that are friends with each other have all the same weird little issues and intricacies.
Imagine having a daughter, and even in a fictional world, pitching the idea. By the way, the character and you are so close together. You're named the same on screen, so it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Imagine having the mindset, I'm going to pitch an idea that I had sex with my daughter somehow and impregnated her. Just imagine how much of a fucking degenerate to even think of it, to pitch that idea to your daughter.
Yeah. And then imagine voting somebody like that into the highest office in the land.
Well, it's not precisely the same, but Trump has said creepy things about his daughter.
Yeah,
he has said creepy things like, "Oh, I would date my daughter if I could." So yes, you're right about that. But yeah, there's a weird control. I can do whatever I can get away with whatever I want thing that happens with some of these rich people with, no ethical boundaries.
It's a danger. It's a danger.
Because to him, he's like, well, I can get away with it. I'm Vince McMahon.
Good people with money should be funding superheroes to fight these guys.
the good Lex Luthors out there.
If you're out there, help us. Help us.
I guess the point is this. This is what the larger conversation I wanted to have, I guess, on a sociological or psychological perspective. Vince has done a bunch of heinous shit, a lot of it public. This is and more behind the scenes that's coming out. We hear stories about him paying off women he worked with, hush hush money. That's one of the reasons he got thrown off of the board of directors and CEO of the company to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Because well, you're using company money to pay off these women for sex. Well, that's not right in a publicly traded company. So the fact that people like John Cena or The Rock, was only The Rock who said, or Bruce Pritchard, his right-hand man, or like, oh, Vince is a great guy because Bruce Pritchard said, this was in the last episode, beginning of the last episode. He said, I'm paraphrasing, and I understand his emotional perspective. He said, this is like late 90s. My wife was diagnosed with cancer, and they gave her months to live, and Vince made sure she got the best treatment that she possibly could get, and now she's still with me 25 years later. That's the type of person Vince is. I don't agree with this documentary portraying him as being someone bad, because they had seen early cuts the first couple episodes by that point. And so to Bruce, Vince is great. He treats me well. I've been working with him for 30 years. He helped save my wife's life. So to him, he's a good person. And to me, I understand that emotional response. I will just say to someone like Bruce, though, is that's one of the most selfish things you can possibly feel about someone, is to ignore someone's behavior and personality faults in the larger world for how they are because they treated you nicely.
Yeah, and it's calculated.
That's how bad people get away with things in general.
It's calculated on the part of Vince, too. Have you ever, and you don't have to admit to this if you don't want, but I'm sure that people can understand the notion sometimes of when you're looking for a parking spot in a city and you see that there's a spot that you're probably going to get a ticket, but you need to park your car really bad.
Okay.
So you'll just think to yourself, you know what? How much is the ticket? Right?
All right, you're in LA, guys. This is more applies to you, but okay.
Well, I'm just saying, in general, you think to yourself, how much is the ticket? And it could be even at a lot that costs money or something you just pay the maximum price to get the better to get the better spot or whatever.
Sure.
So imagine then that you're a billionaire, and what is worth somebody's wife needs cancer treatment, who will then be loyal to you for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. I'll pay that. What's it going to be?
$150,000. We'll say it's $150,000 in the late 90s. It's probably $100,000 to make sure. And it's that's nothing to that person.
Yeah, that's nothing.
That's nothing.
And it's easy. It's an easy yes. It's a cost of doing business. Gaining a loyal crony, and then you can be as monstrous as possible, and they will always be able to look to that instead of asking themselves, should I leave or should I blow the whistle forever?
That's like me going, hey, Alex, I'm going to buy you, the X-Men hardcover collection, every issue from 63 to 2023. It cost me $500. I know, Alex is my guy now. He's loyal because I bought him some shit.
I'd be like, sorry, Pat, I already have that.
I already have that.
Sorry. That's already in my collection.
You see what I mean? But I've seen that so much, especially with online personas. I get in trouble.
It works on everyone.
Where someone's like, whoa, that person couldn't have done this bad thing because they were nice to me at a convention. It's like
psychological. It's like psychological. It's like a psychological principle, I think, even.
I just don't understand how these, what? Like, you understand that this is exactly what people said about serial killers? Oh, he was a nice guy in the neighborhood. I don't know. I didn't know he had like 20 bodies buried in the basement.
Yeah. Well, it's like, you touch people to like get a bit of like, you like make a little bit of contact with someone to like convince them of your opinion, right? Stuff like that. Like some ways to control people are like about the animal brain, like Vince is very good at manipulating people in that way. And I've been in workplaces like that all my life, like, working at big corporations or working with, being in meetings with CEOs that are just like,
you can tell, you can see the psychopathic behavior. You can see it.
So rich, so crazy. Everyone in the room afraid of them. I've seen people get fired in the middle of a meeting.
Really? In board meetings? Or just
Hollywood is a crazy place, man. Like
get out. You're fired.
Oh yeah, get out. Like what?
Can you give me an example of someone getting fired and why they got fired that you witnessed that was like ridiculous?
Yes, fighting for their work.
Fighting for the work? What do you mean? Can you expand on that?
Like okay, so this guy was like I'm going to try not to in any way incriminate myself.
Can you get sued? Are you under NDA?
I'm definitely under NDA about like saying what I was working on, but I don't think that's going to happen here. But like
it ran out of NDA.
This other person that I work with like would always pitch stuff that was very like I think very good stuff, and I think everybody there thought it was good stuff. But the boss was not a creative and would not understand the sort of way in which this person's ideas were good. Just couldn't see the vision of this person and would constantly give them like the most brainless notes. I'm trying to think of like The Godfather or something like that. Like, could you just make it less busy in the frame? Could you think you could tell Mr. Brando to tone it down a little bit? Like just anti-good decisions, and then they'd always butt heads. And then one time, the steam was so turned up in the room that he said, I forget exactly what he said, but he said something like, you're stupid. Something just like the simplest, but it like, because you're a dumbass or something like that.
The CEO said that to the...
No, the
creative
artist,
said that to the CEO.
Artist, yeah,
wow.
The creative said that, and the guy was like, get your things.
Well, that's, you know what, in that situation, I might say the same thing. You call me stupid in front of everyone?
No. It was the most nasty, disgusting abuse of power and somebody inserting themselves into a situation that they should not have been in and micromanaging their employee who absolutely should be the one being listened to in the conversation, or you would hire somebody else. But some people think that you should listen to your boss no matter what, even if they're wrong.
Was there a way to say the same thing without actually saying you're stupid to your boss? Was there a way to say?
Like, of course, this person could have been the bigger man another time, right?
But he had enough. The creative had enough.
It was just there's not a person in the room who would tell you it wasn't justified that he blew up finally.
So they knew they were getting fired probably after they said that. They probably knew this.
It was definitely like a degaff moment for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. But it's very common because those people are fickle.
So I guess I don't know a huge amount more to say about the documentary. You should check it out, Alex, because it might depress you being that you've been in these situations with these sort of people probably more than I have.
The corrupting power of money, the corrupting power of status is unbelievable. I already saw the trailer for this, and I'm like, I was a little under the weather, but like, I'm going to watch this because I'm actually just interested.
Well produced, and it gives you a nice history of the wrestling business as well along the way.
Yeah. And if you have seen it, I do recommend also checking out on Max. I think this is on Netflix, but the one on Max that I thought was good that's kind of in the same area as this is Ren Fair, where the guy who runs the Texas Renaissance Fair, since it was created however many years ago, like is like 95 years old. He's like half blind. He keeps getting cancer removed from his body, and
What?
he's talking about like passing on his kingdom because they call him King George, and so there's like
okay.
so there's like the Prince of Snacks is like one of the people who's like moving in, who like has built his fortune running a lot of the snack stands.
He's looking for.
It's like King Lear. Yeah, it's like Game of Thrones. But it's
who's
like
going to
out of
inherit
Renfair.
from this old guy? That's like Succession. It's the show Succession.
But it's real. It's a little bit over dramatized, but like there's the guy who's like not rich, but he's like the loyal entertainment guy who's like the doctrine, the doctrine will live on. There's like this outside person who's like a no nonsense business person. There's like a rich family, independently wealthy family that's in the mix at one point, and it's all like Ren Fair themed. So great double feature with the McMahon documentary. What's it called? Mr. McMahon?
Mr. McMahon, that's the name of his
Mr.
character.
McMahon.
Which again grew out of a real situation with Bret Hart, because people saw, Bret spit on him in TV and yelled at him, cursed him, and that spun into the character that then feuded with Stone Cold Steve Austin. So Bret Hart is like responsible for the Mr. McMahon character. And by the way,
the most disgusting way possible.
The one telling part of it, the one part that showed who and what Vince was. I always look for these little moments really define people more than the big ones, in my opinion. It's the moments that you don't expect them to be defined. It was his wife, Linda, ran and didn't win as senator of Connecticut like 15 years ago. And Vince pumped in tens of millions of dollars, into the campaign. When she gave her concession speech that night, Vince wasn't anywhere near her. He's like off in the corner in the crowd while she's giving the concession speech, and you see tears just forming under his eyes with like this, like sad, like 7-year-old who didn't get the ice cream cone he wanted. And it was such a telling moment that they didn't really harp on during the documentary. But to me, it's like, that's who he is. He could not control the situation. No matter how much money he pumped into it, he still lost, and he did not get what he wanted, and now he's tearful. He can't help himself about it. He's a fucking baby. That's who Vince McMahon is.
I would loathe to think what he did behind closed doors.
Imagine not being a man enough to stand next to your wife or anywhere near her during a concession speech, and you're off in the fucking corner of this crowd of people while she gives a concession speech. You're not man enough to do that, but now you don't want to look as a loser on TV.
He didn't want to cry.
Well, no, he was tearing up, but he didn't win. He could not. This is a situation he cannot worm his way out of or buy himself into. Somehow he wasn't convicted of the steroid stuff in the federal trial. That's still because I guess Hogan decided, well, I don't want to, throw Vince under the bus because I can still do business with him again, which he eventually did. So
Hogan is such a piece of shit to the rest of the wrestlers.
Brilliant entertainer, the most important probably pro wrestler in history, but just an awful human being.
If I was a wrestler, I can't imagine not hating the fuck out of Hulk Hogan. It's just for squashing the Union alone is the most rat bastard shit I've ever heard in my life.
Well, why would he need a union, Hogan? He was the biggest guy. He was making millions of dollars.
Oh yeah, well, as long as he's covered, as long as Hulk's got it, Hollywood, as long as Hollywood's good.
Yeah, he's a piece of trash, and obviously he,
and he's a fucking racist. Yeah,
he undermined so many other wrestlers throughout the years, and Randy Savage and Ultimate Warrior was not a saint himself. That's one thing I've got to say about in the trial. Vincent said, "Oh, I never told my wrestlers to take steroids," and it's well, you might not have said it directly, but if you look at the hard chiseled steroid bodies of almost all of your big stars, everyone was using. That was a huge star.
It's obvious.
Everyone.
We know so much about them. You can just get an AI algorithm to take a picture of a guy and guess whether he's on steroids or not.
For the most part, in the 80s up until the early 90s, none of the wrestlers that held a championship title, from Hogan to Randy Savage to Rick Rude to Ultimate Warrior to some of the tag teams, by and large, not all of them, but most of the big moneymakers had the chiseled steroid bodies. That was the look in the 80s, and for movies as well.
Made a better action figure.
Yeah. So to say that, I never told them, it's well, they realized if I want to be in the top of the card, I had to do that. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
The bodies on those people were Today they don't even get away with it. Now they actually do like drug testing.
You
They
can fucking tell just with your eyeballs, bro. Seriously.
They'll never replicate those bodies they had in the 80s because they were using so much back then.
It almost grosses me out. Like, like when you see a sandwich and it's like too much. Like when there's like 4 burger patties and some pastrami and a fried egg and everything, and you're like, good Lord, like the fuck is that? That's what it started to feel like. I think that's why I never like went all the way in. It felt like kind of noir. It's like
it used
tits.
to be. There was a time from like the late 90s to like late 2000s where you'd get like 4 or 5 wrestlers dying every year, and almost none of them reached the age of 45. I'm not even like Mr. Perfect.
Dude, that's the only thing I know is like
British
all the
Bulldog.
wrestlers who died.
A lot of these wrestlers passed away. Their hearts just gave out from not just using steroids, but maybe party drugs and painkillers and
fucking
opiates
cocaine and like drinking heavily because you're like
everything.
huge. Yeah.
So all those wrestlers, like there's a whole, you can look at there's like a whole website for the list of wrestlers' deaths, and it's like rare that one of them saw the age of 50. Like it's just not right. Like Eddie Guerrero died at like 40 years old. Just died in his hotel room before a pay-per-view. So, all right, check it out.
Which like inadvertently killed Chris Benoit pretty much.
Well, that was probably the concussions and the CTE that got him.
Yeah, but you know what? When Eddie went down, that's when he lost himself.
It was let's see, what was the timing on that? You're right. It was like the year before.
Yeah,
around that. But
yeah.
The whole
he's like
Benoit
the only.
thing-
To be clear, he's like the only wrestler I can speak with confidence about because I did like a huge profile on him.
which one? On Guerrero?
On Chris Benoit for the
Benoit.
show. Yeah.
He's my favorite wrestler. I think I told you before the show. Like
we were talking about how beautiful he was at flying around.
Just of being a good technical wrestler.
Yeah.
Everything looked smooth and real. That's why Bret Hart was a master of his craft.
crushed
Everything
it.
looked
Yeah.
kind of real. Like you made it look real without hurting your
He was
dance
like a
partners.
student. He was like a student of the form for real.
God, Bret Hart was such a brilliant wrestler. He made anyone look good.
Benoit too.
Yeah, both of them. All right, what's next? What are we talking about? Talking about being in a round table, talking about creative
Listening
stuff.
to the loudest people in the room to make your creative decisions is such a good idea, Hollywood. You should do it if you want to be like Marvel Studios, the successful Hollywood studio that makes all the money and everybody loves and watches all their stuff. Them and Star Wars, the 2 biggest, strongest brands right now. That's what they're trying to say. That's the idea that we're pitching as a good idea in Variety, right?
Let's talk about this article by Adam B. Barry.
Yeah, basically, like I saw it originally as a post on Reddit that was a quoted tweet, right? But the basic gist is in the wake. I think the fact that the Acolyte got canceled and that the perception is that it was because there was like a hate campaign against it online that it got canceled was the like sort of popular idea. People are saying, "Oh, we're going to start focus testing more heavily." And like screening movies for audience reaction so that we don't have any extreme reactions from our audiences anymore. Basically. Because that's bad for business, maybe.
So I guess what is the argument being made is that Hollywood might lean into focus groups to help them prep and prepare their future content.
They treat it as like getting in front of like PR, quote unquote, PR disasters with regard to the reception of their movies or content. Basically, right?
And this goes into what the Lord of Rings of Power show,
Bridgerton,
the Acolyte, which, I heard things as the Acolyte. Even I heard from Star Wars fans like, yeah, I'm just not into it. Then I look at the budget of some of these shows. Holy shit! Acolyte cost $230 million. Well, that's one reason to cancel it. The fact that it costs so fucking much.
It's stuff that like I don't know like exactly how accurate this is to Disney specifically, but they're the name that I've heard passed around in this context before. But basically the deal is like they're the ones that are like canceling writers' rooms as we know them and replacing them with like Marvel Studios writing program and shit like that. And then we're out here trying to, watch a movie, and instead we get this like calculated product that's like disguised as a script that has this sort of ulterior motive of like hitting demos and nailing trends and all these things and not upsetting anyone, not being too good, not being too bad, just enough to be fine and accepted by people. And that's what they're trying to do. It's really weird.
Well, okay, so you want to look at some of these quotes from this article? You're the head of this topic. I have one right here that's fascinating. Want me to read it?
Yeah, go for it.
Those who did talk with Variety, some were afraid to talk to Variety, some of the people in Hollywood about this subject. Those who did talk with Variety all agreed that the best defense is to avoid provoking fandoms in the first place. In addition to standard focus group testing, studios will assemble a specialized cluster of superfans to assess possible marketing materials for a major franchise project. They're very vocal, says the studio exec. They will just tell us, if you do that, fans are going to retaliate. These groups have even led studios to alter the projects. If it's early enough and the movie isn't finished, we can just make those kinds of changes. So
I know somebody who was in the Sonic the Hedgehog focus group post PR nightmare.
Oh, they have him redo the face?
How to fix Sonic? Yeah.
Well, I knew this behind the scenes a little bit. Originally, it was pitched, from what I heard, that like the original pitch and from the FX group was the proper face, and then the director said, no, I don't want that. I want that instead. So it basically just went back to like what they originally wanted.
I would be surprised if every expert who came into that room wasn't just like, make it look like fucking Sonic. But you know,
that's where you had material to draw upon where it made sense in terms of like, hey, just make it look more like what we're used to. But when you're talking about something like Star Wars, where you know you're struggling to come up with new ideas at this point, right? It's all Jedi and Sith shit forever.
It's not that they're struggling to come up with ideas. It's that they are refusing to produce anything that's not, you know, in a very specific niche. And then, you know, something like The Acolyte comes out, which is like completely out of left field, and it just feels weird.
Sure. But I don't know. Superfans, what do you think about superfans? Since you talk about, I know someone who's a Sonic superfan that's helping them. In general, though, does this scare you? Is this something that's necessary to make sure that these projects don't get backlash? Should the studios care about online backlash?
No, I don't think they should. I think people are kind of like high on it right now. I think that they got Hollywood to look at them for a minute, and it inflated their importance.
Okay.
And I think that this is Hollywood's fault for inviting a bunch of influencers and stuff to everything and using them for so long as like the sort of like ambassadors between their audiences and their products, because I think it was done kind of thoughtlessly, and they kind of gave away part of the conversation to people that they weren't in total control of.
So you're saying some of the influencers that got involved as ambassadors, they didn't spun negatively on some of these products or projects?
I think that there is a type of like hate YouTuber that is like the dark mirror to like the positive ones, because if you're too positive, you get invited to stuff and people can like smell that on you. People can smell like commercial on you. And I don't know, like I feel like even in the retro world, like the anti-shill pitchfork crowd is out there in force, you know, and I think like you know, the retro crowd is like the cousin to the like comic book movie crowd or the Star Wars or fantasy movie crowd in a lot of ways in that sense. And I think like, you know, I think that the combination of the fact that audiences don't like people that are doing brand deals pretty much, and the fact that it makes more money to be negative on something.
Okay.
Hollywood basically created a way that the audiences can come together who hate their stuff and have a giant voice and like control popular opinion on products.
Well, or was it just a response to social media?
I think that it could have happened independently of anything that the movie studios did, for sure, but I definitely think that the sort of like investment that a lot of studios made, it probably for financial reasons mostly, you know, like it's a lot cheaper now to do a premiere or something like that when you just have to invite a bunch of people who bring their own cell phone and do everything and get more views than you were getting and stuff like that.
It's almost like the advertising got lazier to you, where hell, we can just invite Instagram influencers and TikTokers to come to our red carpet. So
and
you're
that's
saying-
now replaced. We've handed our votes, basically. We've handed individual opinions on things mattering, right, to like 100 people that represent our fandom at all levels that like boil down our arguments and largely have the same argument for SEO reasons. So now you're like, you've basically handed over like your enjoyment of stuff mattering to like Angry Gamer 69, you know, who just hates it when like Asian people or women are in video games.
So, okay, you're saying in theory that's what's happening. I guess what I would argue is it's not happening because the online cloud always appears larger than what it really is on the ground in reality. So, like, for example, like there was so much hatred about, what's a big one where you have YouTubers doing 5-hour videos about how much they hate The Last Jedi, right?
Sure.
You know how much money The Last Jedi made in theaters?
So much.
Box Office Mojo, how much did it make?
So much. Made like $1 billion.
It made $1.3 billion.
Yeah.
Like Captain Marvel, which, you know, there's some YouTubers that have done 40 videos alone on how much they hate Captain Marvel. That made $1 billion.
Yeah, but that era of time right there that you're talking about, where Captain Marvel and Last Jedi were at, that was kind of the inflection point of what I'm talking about. That was kind of where we lost it. You know, like when you look at The Last Jedi and you look at the rise of Skywalker, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's obvious, you know, that
pre-pandemic, by the way, I don't know if that changed things.
It certainly probably did, is in that it's Hollywood itself is also dying, you know, in another way. But, you know, The Last Jedi, right? It's a big swing from a director, right? Like, it's like a bold and obviously auteurish sort of movie from Rian Johnson, who's like a guy who's involved at every granular point in the process of making his movies. He's a huge film nerd.
Sure.
He made something very big and expensive and bold. And then the next one, they like fired the director because it was so polarizing that it like made Disney blink. And they like redid the Han Solo movie, and they did all this stuff because they felt like, you know, they had alienated their fan base.
They
right?
redid Rogue One as well.
Yeah, and they felt like I think there was problems with the Rogue One behind the scenes also, but they felt like they alienated their fan base, and they in the Rise of Skywalker, they even like, there's scenes where they like talk about things from Last Jedi and like criticize them for the audience members and stuff like that, and it just feels so much more like made by an AI SEO algorithm than The Last Jedi does. And I would say that the opinion on Marvel flipped around the same time as the opinion on Star Wars. I would say Endgame was the last thing that like kind of really came out that everybody loved. And I feel like since then we've been getting these very like unconfident sort of like appeasement films and things that don't really do much for anybody. And everybody's kind of been
certain groups, or appeasement just like ticking boxes off, or
like
hey,
I'm saying I think like a lot of the like the goals have shifted from being like beautiful good things to being like not too good, not too bad. In the same way that Mr. Beast was saying he doesn't like have too much fun in his videos because that alienates viewers, and how like inhuman that is. I think there's a
I didn't say. He said he doesn't want to have too much fun in his videos.
Yeah, he says he kind of tries to keep it like pretty middle of the road so that nobody finds him annoying and stuff. And so like that's where we're at. That's where we're at with like movies and everything now. And the idea that it's not for everybody is like gone. And so that's like, this type of thing is just evidence of that happening. And I believe that it is happening mostly because we have things like, it's not even test screenings to audiences. It's a representative government now. It's like when you're in Texas and you're being represented by Ted Cruz, you know what I mean? And you're just like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? So like that's what's happening right now.
I don't know. I just think
no YouTuber with extreme unique opinions becomes the most famous YouTuber. You have to have opinions that are SEOable and marketable. And so the ones that are interesting, who do have followings, aren't the ones that get invited, and those voices go down, and the ones that do get invited go up. And it's just not
so
pro creativity. Yeah.
I want to get more to the heart of like, if having Superfans focus group movies. I think it's from a arts and entertainment, from an art standpoint, I think it's gross to think that super fans, because why are they super fans? Because they are super fans because they were consumers of art / entertainment that they were a big fan of, that they had zero input on at all, that they enjoyed, right? And enjoyed it so much that they then bought the toys, bought the graphic novels, bought the Blu-rays. They then got into the ecosystem, right? That they had, the only part they had in that ecosystem was handing over their money. That was it.
Right.
Or saying,
Right.
hey, I like this, I will talk about it, right? So they had zero to do with the creation of it. Why then, even if their heart's in the right place, why then should their opinion, being a super fan, matter enough or matter more than the people that originally created what they became a super fan of? What gives them the, not even right, but why do you think they would know better than the folks that created the things that made them a super fan?
The logic from the point of the studio is that they are the ones that drive the engagement. That's the only part of it that the studio cares about.
No super fan had any influence whatsoever on the greatest piece of Star Wars work ever, The Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
No super fan had any influence on the script, on the shooting of it, on the
Right.
editing, on the marketing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing.
Right, because people didn't make YouTube videos that could like end the cinematic life of a film at that time.
But even when it came out, critics were kind of divided on The Empire Strikes Back. You probably talked about it. Some critics were like, what the hell is this? When it came out.
But exactly, and it's very similar to how The Last Jedi was received. But according to, the wake of that release, one is lauded as one of the best movies of all time, but the other one, which I think is a great movie, like I don't think it's for everybody, but I think like Last Jedi is a very well made movie.
I think it's an
least.
interesting movie.
Yeah,
I don't think
at
it's a
the-
good Star Wars movie.
Like,
That's basically two things.
We could argue forever about that. I'm
we
just
could.
saying it's a legitimate. Let's put it this way: it's a legitimate swing as a piece of art.
Yes.
and
It tries to do something.
it has a soul. Yeah, it has.
Yes.
It's a real movie, and I think that what happened was a bunch of people who made videos about that without any, again, who had no input on anything in the process, just chose like 10 things to get mad about and educated millions of people about them. And so then Disney thinks, oh, we need to address those in the next movie. So
Sure. That was, well, there was a lot of things that happened. Well, one, The Force Awakens, 1.3 billion was impressive. The Force Awakens did 2 billion. So that's like a pat math. That's like a 35% drop off.
yeah, but one of them
revenue.
is the return of Star Wars.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It was never going to get close. We
Yeah.
understand that. So they probably got scared because of that. The other thing that happened that was really the weirdest thing ever is everyone saying that, Kylo Ren should hook up with Rey. That became a weird thing online, really fucking weird, and so that's one of the reasons they changed it. We can talk about what happened with this trilogy. The fact of the matter is they had no plan. That's why it was a failure as a trilogy. They had no plan laid out at all, which is inexcusable for the biggest IP franchise on the planet.
Sure.
But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we can't talk about Star Wars specifically. Yeah.
Whole other conversation. That's really not to say whether or not you agree with The Last Jedi or the course correction, quote unquote, with Rise of Skywalker. That's the problem with that trilogy. That's it. And that's acknowledged by everyone. That's
From a
what happened
creative
with that.
standpoint, you can make a great case that that's the problem. But the point is that that's not what people are doing. The point is that people with no context, no screenwriting expertise, nothing, are just putting on the hindsight glasses.
Yes.
Looking at a movie that already exists and just playing to their audience's most like base feelings because
Correct.
that's what does the biggest numbers. And that's not even what makes art, like that's not even the part of your brain that you normally interact with art with as an audience member.
This is what they should have done. I mean, this is what the focus group should be. Let's get 12 of the best filmmakers alive.
Yes, every time.
And get them
Yeah.
in a room and talk about what would you do with a Star Wars film and get ideas that way. That's what the people that actually have created good things.
Not
Like,
even that.
not
I'm just saying instead of the 10 best Sonic YouTubers, let's just get the same like like let's get actually not even the same, a rotating group of like 25 of the world's greatest storytellers and filmmakers each time. And be like, what's wrong with this movie? And then they go, well, we can't change that. And they're like, okay, well, maybe like something like this, and we can make something good out of it.
Let's get Scorsese, Lynch, and Tarantino. How do we save Star Wars? Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And even if they weren't like, okay, we'll give you a week to prime yourself in the movies, and we'll pay you all $100,000 each for 3 hours of your time. You don't think they would do that? They absolutely would. Like, they
I
would.
would do
Okay,
that
yeah,
for,
I grew up
I would
watching
do that for
Star
free.
Wars.
Yeah.
Like, I'll get in a room and I'll talk with Lucas or whatever at the time, or not even Lucas, the Disney execs. Like, why wouldn't someone want to do that? Like, why wouldn't you want to talk to the people that have created brilliant art that's also entertainment and be like, what do we do with this now? We're stuck. We've ran out of ideas. What do we do now? You either have to do that, or you get someone that's really on top of things. You have to get a czar that's on top of things, like Kevin Feige. That's like, this is what we're doing for 10 years of movies, and we're going to do it to the fucking letter. But he actually knows what he's doing. Like, but that's so much harder to find that person, because they failed with that person being Zack Snyder for the DC shit. That was a huge failure.
Or just market movies after they're actually made.
Market movies after they're actually made. Well, I mean, that's a different conversation. We're talking about like making sure it comes out and people like enjoy it. It's a good work of art.
I think that the idea that every movie is going to come out and be good is fucking stupid as fuck.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that the idea that they should target that is stupid as fuck. And I think that the actual goal should be to make stuff that various different groups of people really respond to. And I'm not even saying from like a pro, like a hippy dippy, like pro artist standpoint, which is my real opinion, right? Like if I was just gonna like campaign, that's where I'd be at. But if I was in a fucking like consulting position, talking to somebody who genuinely asked me, how should I run this studio or this brand in general? The thing that every brand, film studio, soft drink, fucking movie franchise, fast food, the mistake they always make is short-term profits over like health of the brand.
Oh,
every single time. And there's nothing wrong with the system that doesn't please everybody every time. Like the currency that you will have with everyone any time, like the fact that you can say, I know for a fact that you hated this movie, The Last Jedi, right? You did not love this movie, right?
But you're not saying me, but the general you. Okay.
Like the people out there that hated this movie, I know they're out there. Like almost the most toxic people that I've talked to about the movie usually get with me on the fact that it's a fucking like well-made picture, if you know what I'm saying. Like it's like a filmmaker who's working at the top of his game, taking a swing and with intention.
Correct.
Stuff
even
like
if you don't agree with the decisions,
even if you don't like the movie,
something.
Yeah. So that proves right there, right, that the average audience member, though as a group humans are stupid, we're not actually blind stupid. You know what I mean? Like I'm a dumb guy in a lot of ways, but if there's 1,000 of me, we don't miss a trick, right? A movie that's good quality always gets a pass for being good quality, even if you don't like the movie. And even if it makes you mad, you're going to come back to Star Wars even if you didn't like one, because you know that this is synonymous. Like look at James Bond. Look at how
there's been some really bad Star Trek films. There's been bad James Bond movies.
They're all over the place, but because
they're well
each
made.
One, and each one is like a big swing. Same thing with Disney. If we're just going back to Disney, like even the animated movies, even the like live action movies, like I don't know, like they're all quality. Even old Marvel, Thor 2 is like one of the worst superhero movies I've ever seen, but it still has like a Disney sparkle to it that makes me go, "Oh, Disney is a company that makes good things."
Did Disney make that one? That's when they bought it? Let's see. When did Disney buy it? I don't know if Disney. Let's see. Disney buys
Disney Marvel.
Oh, it was 2009.
Yeah, it was
so
a long time. Yeah.
Okay, so that's about when they were making the first one, 2009. Okay.
Yeah, and so for me, like pretty much all the Marvel movies are Disney movies for the most part that have come out, right? Like,
except for the first few,
like couple, yeah. Like once they locked down like Hulk and all that shit, but like that's what I'm saying. Like even Thor 2, which is like popularly thought of as like maybe the worst. Like
I think it's
old-
Iron Man 2 but Thor 2 is bad.
Another one,
yeah.
but even Iron Man 2, like, even though we know what happened with Iron Man 2. It was like in the strike, it was fucking like, you know, a movie that kind of came.
Yeah, that was that's when they were filming that, so that was not a Disney one.
Yeah,
Iron Man 2.
but Thor 2, it's like not that great, but it still has quality sparkle, and it doesn't diminish your brand to put out a bad thing that's still made well. That doesn't diminish your brand. Same thing with anything like a shirt company that makes shirts. You're not going to buy every fucking shirt that comes out. That's fucking insane.
I guess the calculus though is that, hey, we're investing with marketing, $400 million into this project. We can't afford to take too many hits on these because we will be out of business. That's basically.
I completely agree, but I think in general, at every step, we're spending too much. Like
we're spending too much money.
The whole thing is
movies cost way too much.
The whole thing is fucked up. Yeah,
movies cost way too much. That's one thing.
And it's an inflated
and video games. Like
it's an inflated, bloated cost.
The budgets are so far out there that you cannot take as much risk anymore, and you have to have a surefire hit more and more versus, hey, we can have a minor success here or a minor loss.
Every movie that everybody loves at the end of the year is fucking Godzilla -1, right? it costs like $10 million. Like the best movies of the year every
year. What did Barbie
year
cost? That made over $1 billion.
Like that actually cost like $200 million, I think.
Barbie,
but Barbie's like a once in a generation type of movie. That's a crazy movie. Right?
145, but marketing was 150. Wow, more than
that.
So 300 million total.
Yeah, but Barbie made $1 billion, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Barbie, that movie blew me away.
Oh, the AI is bullshit. It did not make 337 million globally. No, it made 1.4 billion dollars. I hate. You know what, Google? I like the LM Notebook. Fuck you for your AI overview. When I do a search, I don't want your AI overview because half the time it's wrong.
He doesn't want the generated ducks, Google. Yeah.
You're not an AI search engine. You're a fucking search engine. Yeah. I'm so annoyed that I knew that Barbie made over $1 billion, and I was told it didn't on my Google search.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, those things are those are flukes. Like, Barbie is like one of those things where you like somehow a movie that's pretty pure got through a big system without much changes and like reached its audience. But that's
Oppenheimer only cost $100 million and it made almost $1 billion.
But that is a cheap movie today. That is a cheap movie. Like Alien Romulus is another one that just like on being a good movie made an impact.
I gotta see that. 80 million. That's like low for
really got to see it. It's really good, and look how much money it's made.
It's made over 300 million worldwide.
So everything is telling us this too. It's like the same thing. Like, I'm a comedian, right? I go out on stage, and all you have to do to be like, I do a lot of improv, or I did a lot of improv a long time ago, like back in the day, and like, all you really have to do is be confident and pass that sniff test of like authenticity, and then you're free. Even if the audience doesn't have the best time, you've given them something that is honest. And movies can be this for the most part, even though they are, we can be cynical and we can talk about how even at their best, 1,000 people work on a movie and there's all these different hands and too many cooks in the kitchen, but you can make something with some heart. A movie can come out and move you, but this type of practice where you're inflating these movies and you're trying to do all this stuff, it's unnatural. So it's not artistic.
As long as the art / entertainment comes from an honest place,
yeah.
Even if it's not up to par, you're saying the audience will be more accepting of it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where we've seen the past few years, and maybe with Rise of Skywalker, that was partially made on committee, where people could tell, even if this was closer to the Star Wars we liked, it does not pass. There's a weird sort of test that's not being passed of honesty here to us.
That's like what schlock is. Like movies that are like camp or schlocky or whatever, like
Toxic Avenger, good example.
Yeah, Toxic Avenger, perfect example. It's like not a good movie. It's not a good movie by like filmmaking standards,
but
right?
It's honest.
Yeah,
It's an
but
honest-
it is. It is. It's like some fucking wacko trying to make us go ha 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 for a long time, and it fucking does, and we love them for it. Or like these fucking stupid ass Leprechaun, or like Puppet Master, stupid ass movies like
half
that.
of the horror films that are just schlocky.
Yeah.
but
Or
they're done honestly.
what's the Bronson movies? Death Wish
Wish?
5. Like
Oh God, Death Wish 5.
just shit like that. Like
we
you're
should
like
watch that together. Death Wish 5.
But you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's stupid to blow up an old man with a grenade launcher, right? But like we love it because they did it in its earnest, and you know that it's like it's like the same
They
thing
had
with
fun making it. Probably. They
It's
probably
like
had fun
Tommy
with it.
Wiseau. You know what I mean? Same thing with The Room. Like just a horrible movie, but the reason we are continually entranced by it for years and years later is because a man tried his best, and that's what came out.
I don't think that's why people like that film, because it's a meme. That's why they like that.
No, but
I'll agree
that's
to
why
disagree
it's a
on that.
meme. That is why it's a meme, because the nobody could choose to go, I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark. Like, that's not like a joke that you write. You can't capture that in a bottle. You cannot. It is
Yeah,
something.
It was a perfect storm of someone that.
It's an
making a
honest,
film
it's a
that-
real thing.
I
That's
guess you could say it's honest. It's
Yeah.
just super bad.
it's terrible, but
It's Manos the Hands of Fate for a new generation.
yeah, but you
That's
got to
what it is.
appreciate that realness, and it's what humans crave, and that's why it's so dumb that we don't want it. We don't know to ask for it because we're too selfish. When people ask us what we want, we go crazy and we start talking about exactly what would be perfect in our imagination world. Same thing in politics, where we're like, I'm not voting because this candidate doesn't have exactly every single point that I agree with on the same thing.
What is
and
the,
you
what
know,
is
and
the
it's-
expression? Perfection is the enemy of progress. It's one of the all-time best sayings.
Yeah, exactly.
And the same for arts and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have perfection. You're lucky you got something good. Like
satisfying everybody probably means that everybody's just fine with it.
So I guess that's what we come back to. So this is a lot more scary to me, or scarier to me, than the AI Notebook LM stuff, is the fact that we have a group of superfans dictating what the rest of us want. That
Yeah.
to me is more scary than anything else, because that means less risk taking, and now you're getting a bunch of people that maybe some of them have created something on a home movie, but a bunch of people that may have never written a piece of a short story or a poem in their lives, telling us what's a good narrative, or telling us how characterizations should happen.
Well, at least
that's
with
the
this,
scariest thing to me.
At least with this, it's creating jobs in the industry instead of destroying them, which AI does. At least when somebody needs you
super
to.
fans are not getting paid. They're getting a free pizza. And
No,
a big
when
gulp.
somebody says you got to erase Sonic's face and replace it, right? That's more hours, right?
Well, yeah, they just had to repay the same company. to
Right.
redo
But
it.
when AI does something, it's like, hey, now we didn't have to pay someone. Tight. So I still like the super fans more than the AI. But
Is that what we learned today? What did we learn today in the Not Scum Vlogs? We learned that you prefer superfans to Notebook LM AI. Is that what
I prefer any humans to a complete lack of human involvement. But if we're gonna ask, how to make movies better, the answer is to chill the fuck out, spend less money, and let people that know what they're doing make some good movies for once.
All right. I learned that Mr. McMahon is the same as Vince, not
Yeah.
different at all.
Yeah, not different one bit.
I also learned that Carl and Debbie really like talking about Goldie more than I thought they would.
Yeah.
But they didn't get into the nitty gritty of shaking things in my face. So they do have a line they don't cross, Carl and Debbie.
I learned that Hulk Hogan is a huge piece of shit, even huger a piece of shit than I realized, allegedly.
Well, that has to be allegedly. You didn't talk about a crime he committed.
I just don't want him to.
about that beforehand.
I just don't want him to even come after me for libel. I feel like he would. He's a monster, allegedly.
Allegedly. Well, the one time when he sued Gawker for the the sex tape thing, he won that. That's the one time Hulk Hogan was right about something, or in the right about something.
And then he was like, "Hey, brother, I love to say the N-word."
After he had sex with his friend's wife.
Yeah.
What else did we learn today? We learned that Pat maybe wants some privacy sometimes at a convention. That's not going to be possible going
Don't
forward.
go near my baby Bambino. Leave him alone. If you see him waiting at a bus stop by himself, don't ask him anywhere. Just give him a fucking second to himself, okay? Jesus Christ! Just let him get his lift.
No, that person was being very kind.
No,
but
I'm just joking. I'm
I was just taken aback because I was just like, do I look that sad and lonely that you need to come over and offer me a drink?
You're like the Birdman of Alcatraz. Yeah.
I don't need to talk to the voice of Bowser, even though he's a nice person. I've met him before. What's his name? Kenny something.
I don't know.
I learned that Superfans, you got to relax sometimes. You just got to relax.
Everybody's got to relax. It's not fun to like only be happy when you get exactly what you want.
You're not going to have stomach lining when you're 50.
That's fucking stupid. Yeah.
Stop pumping yourself up so much about these dumb movies. It's
like, remember when you didn't know about it and you found it and it felt amazing to find something cool? Remember that?
Hey, listen.
How could you ever even have that if you only had stuff that you could think of yourself?
Listen, Crystal Skull's not a great movie, but I can live with the fact that it exists. It didn't. Yeah. It didn't besmirch the rest of the.
Yeah. The sun went down and it came back up, and so did I, and life went on.
I still watch Temple of Doom like once every 3 or 4 months as one of my favorite, sort of just genre films from the 80s. What else did we learn?
Do you think you could go back and buy your Star Wars toys again? If like as a little peace offering.
We learned
maybe
that
buy back one piece.
I wasn't as smart as I could have been in developing the combat AVGN script because the Google AI figured out things I never intended.
It's too obnoxious to be that on the nose. Don't worry about it. I think yours is more subtle.
Did you like that? What did you think of the CG balls in an episode? Did you like this? They didn't comment on the CG balls at all.
I don't know if they can tell that from reality, to be honest.
I don't think they can tell. Oh, the CG balls.
I don't know that they actually watched it. I feel like they just kind of like absorb it somehow. I don't really understand how AI watches shit.
And when we learned that being a Mets fan is akin to Charlie Brown trying to kick the football and it being pulled out every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
But let's go Mets go. Let's go Grimace. All right, that's it. If you want to advertise with the Nonsense Common podcast, shoot me an email, pat@thepunkeffect.com, and we'll run it through Google Notebook LM and spit out a nice. No, we'll spit out a nice.
Can I get a podcast about my inbox from last week, please?
Have you gotten any emails about this podcast? Any feedback directly, or just people talking about it on Twitter?
I've gotten a few like unpleasant DMs, but nothing like crazy. Like nobody ever like writes me a nice email, but
you've got unpleasant DMs saying that you're bringing down Pat's aura.
I've gotten lots of like hate mail over the years for Chilluminati because like there's like a lot of people who are like basically crazy who like hold the opposite opinions about some of the stuff we talk about.
Oh, okay. Well, that's to be expected.
And so that or the Star Wars podcast where I just liked Last Jedi and somebody sent me my address.
Okay.
In my email.
Okay. What do you say? Okay, great. Now you have it. Who cares? Like
somebody threatened me because I liked the Last Jedi. Like I don't know. I don't know. So compared to that, the reception has been welcoming.
Okay, great. All right. We'll see you next time, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.